We now call the roll of members. Do I hear a motion to dispense?
Mr. Chair, I move that we dispense with the calling to roll.
Is there any second?
Second.
Thank you. There's a motion to dispense with the calling of the roll of members duly seconded. Hearing no objection, the motion is carried. Next item in the agenda is the consideration of the minutes of the committee meeting held on April 22. The minutes of the meeting was emailed to the committee members beforehand for their reading and perusal. Do I hear a motion to dispense and approval of the same?
I move that we dispense with the approval of the same, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Thank you. There is a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes of the meeting held on April 22, 2021 and for its approval. There is a second to that motion. Hearing no objection, the same is approved. Before we proceed, may I direct the committee secretary to call of names members joining us via the Zoom and via physical present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have the following members in attendance. Deputy Speaker Bernadette Herrera D. Deputy Speaker Joselito Atienza Jr. Deputy Speaker Rosemary Baby Arenas. We also have Representatives Adrian Ebcas, Emery Dolores Juano Dizon, Michael Defensor, Cyril Abueg Saldivar, Gabriel Bordado, and Siriaco Gato Jr. Your Honors.
Ms. Committee Secretary, also inform the committee of the resource persons present today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joining us here in conference room 1 and 2 of the Mitra building, we have Dr. Jody Dalmachon. Joining us via Zoom from FDA, we have DDG Oscar Gutierrez, DDG Ronald De Veira, Director Joyce Sironay, Ms. Florita Moraleja, Angeline Togade, and Raquel Avendia. The Secretary received a message from Director General Eric Domingo excusing himself in today's meeting because he is on leave. From PSMID, we have via Zoom Dr. Marisa Alendria, the President of the Philippine Society of Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, Inc. From the PNP, we have the CIDG, Police Major General Albert Ferro, Police Colonel Gideon E.D., and Police Colonel Madrilejo. From the medical field, we have Mr. Johansen de Guzman from the Lloyd Laboratories. We also have Dr. Benigno Agbayani Jr., Attorney Lorna Frances Filipino, Dr. Godofreda Dalmachon, he is here with us. Dr. Leonila Dance. We also have Attorney George San Diego, Lynn Robles from PCPI, and Pat Dilag from the ARTA. Your Honors.
Good morning to the honorable members of the House of Representatives, officials from the House Secretariat, our resource persons, guests, and members of the media. Welcome to the second meeting on the alleged questionable guidelines and policies of the Department of Health and the Food and Drug Administration that may hamper on the public health service delivery to the Filipino people, pursuant to House Resolution 1711, filed by our Speaker, Honorable Lord Alan Velasco, and Deputy Speaker Bernadette Herrera. Our first meeting held 25 days ago was well attended by our House members and fostered a very meaningful and significant discussion, considering the urgent need of finding the most immediate, cost-efficient, and practicable solution to the COVID-19 pandemic. We take our resource persons from the DOH, FDA, Philippine Chambers of Pharmaceutical Industry, and the Philippine Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, and other members of the medical profession and medical industry who all came prepared with their presentations, ready to discuss the tough issues that require the utmost attention, only because the lives of our Filipino people are at stake. A lot has happened since our first meeting. Since then, we have seen the COVID-19 infections drop from an average of 9,500 cases per day to now at around 6,000 cases per day. We are now in the general community quarantine with heightened restrictions, which means we must all be just as careful as if we were still in ECQ. Further, on the development of medicinal products that may prevent or cure COVID-19, we likewise must have seen vast developments on this. One such development is the FDA's granting of the Certificate of Product Registration, or CPR, in favor of Ivermectin for its use as an anti-nematode drug. Although the CPR is not for COVID-19, this is a positive development which greatly enhances access of ivermectin to those who may need it. We thank the FDA for taking action in heeding the calls of the Filipino people. For this reason, I highly expect that there shall be more positive developments after this meeting that shall further equip us in our war against COVID-19. The matters to be raised and resolved in today's meeting will undoubtedly benefit the Filipino people, and we take our participants in order for their service and dedication to our country. Mabuhay po kayo. On that note, I welcome everyone once again to this meeting. Let us be of service to the Filipino people. Thank you and good morning to everyone. Before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge physically present is Congressman Gil Cabalangay Acosta Jr. of the 3rd District of Palawan, Representative Coco Nograles of PBA Party List. On Zoom is DS Rodante Marcolenda, Representative Angelo Barba, Representative Aldo Duhali, Representative Yasser Balindong. Next, to give her opening statement is Deputy Speaker Bernadette Herrera, Principal Author of the House Resolution 1711.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, allow me to thank you for allowing us to have another hearing on this. This is also upon the request of Deputy Speaker Rodante Marcoleta dahil napakahalaga to follow up on what has happened from the previous. Siguro, very quickly, just to follow up kung ano yung mga dapat pang steps na mapakinggan natin in this hearing. Can we, my slide presentation, please? Yung slide. Nandun na. So while waiting for the slide presentation, I'd like to thank, just like what the Chair Mike Aglipa has mentioned, thank FDA for the CPR of ivermectin. Hopefully, other companies can follow and use precedents for the others. Question ko siguro that I hope they can address later is, are there conditions attached to this? And I'd like to follow up if is DEU possible? Paano po pwede nating ilagay for DEU because alam natin na hindi rin naman talaga madali mag-apply for CPR. Now, it's still not widely available in the Philippines. So siguro isa sa mga question is putting this medicine under DEU possible? And I heard from you, Sec Domingo, that we have new medicines under DEU. We would like to know what these are because the last time na alam ko, it was just tocilizumab that's under DEU. And then what are the requirements na natitira so that others can know pagka din-EU, ano na lang ang requirements in order to apply for this? The next question ko is, what about EUA? I heard one company applied for EUA but was disapproved. And I hope FDA could enlighten us. I think that's Kioma. The name of the company is Kioma. And I'd like to know why it was disapproved, on what basis. And I'd like to also be updated as to what vaccines and medicines are under EUA, and if we have communicated the proposed amendments. During the last hearing, Dr. Jody Dalmacion mentioned certain amendments that has to be done to definition of EUA that FDA is using through the administrative order. Kaya, next slide na please. Kaya I was requesting, since matagal ang process to pass a law, and since admin order lang naman yung EUA, ang ni-request ko noon kay Yusek Domingo and with FDA is to write a letter to the president to add the what is supposed to be amended, and I already forwarded to them what Dr. Jody Dalmacion sent to us as to what needs to be amended to the current definition of EUA in our country. So I'd like to be apprised of that one. Next slide, please. Okay. So now, ito, I'd like to be clarified kung kailan ba tayo sumusunod sa WHO at kung kailan hindi. Because I'd like to be cleared about the remdesivir issue and the Ivermectin, yung issue on prescription. Parang kasi, dun sa pinirset ni Kong Mike Defensor, nakikita natin na hindi naman na ina-allow ng WHO ang remdesivir. And Yusek Domingo mentioned during the hearing that we don't have a CPR for this also. It's not also on the DEU. Puro lang din siya compassionate special permit. So parang same level siya as Ivermectin, CSP. Pero bakit sa Ivermectin pinagbabawal ang prescription pero sa remdesivir tuloy-tuloy lang ginagamit sa mga hospitals? So I'd like to know the difference of the two, kung bakit ganun yung treatment. So I'd like to be enlightened. We would like to be enlightened in that. And of course, the stand of the different societies and the status of leronlimab. Next. Still, ang focus natin talaga is how do we now really empower our local pharmaceutical industry? Palagi ko sinasabi, kailangan palakasin natin yung sarili nating atin dito sa bansa because it's hard to rely on other countries, especially in this time of pandemic. So ano yung pwede nating gawin sa policies ng FDA? Kasi sinasabi nila, mas mahirap, napakahirap mag-register dito sa ating bansa. Biruin nyo, mas nagre-register pa yung local pharma natin abroad kaysa sa sarili nating bansa, and that is really pathetic. At yan ang gusto nating topic dito, paano ba natin mapapaluwag lalo na sa panahon ng pandemya. So we have to discuss on what amendments we need to put in the law. Next. Gusto ko pong i-follow up, I think sumobra yung slide back natin. Gusto ko pong i-follow up yung kinukulit ko na let's pause the ASEAN, the ACTD application kasi hindi naman tayo signatory pa dito. I-pause muna natin to para mas madali sa ating local pharma. Let's us use our national guidelines. Yusek Domingo promised me that they will discuss a position paper regarding this because naniniwala ako, national guidelines, tayo rin ang gumawa nito dito sa Pilipinas. At nakakagamit tayo ng mga medicines na galing sa national guidelines na to. So we have to pause the ASEAN since we're not even signatories of this one. So I'd like to be updated kasi hanggang ngayon wala pa akong feedback kung ano na ang posisyon ng FDA with regards and DOH with regards to using the national guidelines and pausing yung ASEAN common technical dossier and common technical requirements. Next. Yung pending applications with FDA, kung meron na ba, gumalaw na ba ito? Ayan, sana ARTA can explain to us the show cause order that they filed kasi napakadami nating issues on disapproved applications. Bakit tayo nagde-disapprove? Out of stock medicines, yung automatic renewals pero bakit nakapending? So hindi siya automatic. It's not so automatic after all. So we have to take a look at that one. Maybe DG Jeremiah Bellica and Lynn Robles of PCPI can discuss on this later. And then ang importante yung proposed amendments to our current law. Si Attorney Filipino and Dr. Jody is here. So they could propose to us certain amendments that we can do. Patent. I also have this issue on patents, Mr. Chair, wherein merong request yung IPO natin that there are certain patents that we have to be COVID and COVID-related medicines that has to be released in time of the pandemic. Kasi habol natin affordable and accessible medicines, COVID and COVID-related medicines. And there are certain patents that hinder us from doing this one. And hopefully, later madiscuss sa atin ng IPO kung paano to go about it para mas madali ang access sa ating mga gamot. Next. Yung process for new inventions, I hope DOST is with us. yung process for new inventions kasi for COVID-19 medicines, yung clinical trial, sana matulungan natin yung sarili nating scientists here. The other day may kausap kami, I think they're inventing the CAP 2020, meron silang sariling trial. I hope that our country, especially DOST, can also support para makita natin baka we can invent also our own medicines here in the country. I was talking to PSMID with regards to, or the CPG, kung ano po ang naging basehan nila dun sa statement about ivermectin, and I would like them to present on this one as to ano yung basis ng clinical trials, because I understand there are 70 clinical trials but they only looked at certain, and then parang tinignan nila lahat ng negative. So gusto ko maintindihan, paano ba tinitignan ang foreign clinical trials? Ano ba ang basis natin as to what to decide, which to based on our decision kung anong clinical trial ito. Siyempre, I would like to hear on both sides, both for and against, para maintindihan natin kung ano ba, how do we analyze foreign clinical trials since we're not experts on this one. May mga experts tayo. So I hope later malinawan po tayong lahat. So basically, ito po yung mga gusto nating i-discuss during the committee hearing. Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat.
Another one of the members wants to give an opening statement. Deputy Speaker Rodante Marcoleta, you are recognized, sir.
Umaga.
We cannot hear you. Please proceed.
Mr. Chair, salamat po pero wala po akong opening statement. Mas gusto ko po na kapagsimula na tayong
Okay, mamaya na lang, sir. Sorry. I now invite any of the research persons if they have opening statement, presentation, comments, wish to relay on this committee, please address the chairman so you can be recognized.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Deputy Speaker Atienza.
Yes, before we start, we would like to ask, by point of inquiry, if the FDA Director General was invited in this meeting.
He is
I
on
don't see him
leave.
around.
He is on leave. Yusek Eric Domingo is 1 month leave. We have the Deputy Director General, the acting Oscar Gutierrez, and we have 4 more of their management team who is here with him. So I think they are more than capable of Representative Yusek Domingo.
My purpose in asking, Mr. Chairman, is that we are in hot pursuit of certain issues with the decisions of the Director General. By conveniently taking a leave, would Congress allow this? And not only for this particular occasion, but for future inquiries. By the convenient way of taking a leave, can they avoid congressional inquiry on their official actuations and decisions? Would we allow that from here on?
The committee will not allow that, but in this particular case, I was informed it is because of a personal matter. His father is sick, and he has filed the 1 month leave because of this. I think he is the last person who will avoid an inquiry, given his previous attendance in various committees and various inquiries.
Well, it's very important, Mr. Chairman, because the integrity of congressional inquiries are at stake in this particular issue.
We will.
We will take the official version at this particular point, but we will not get into the habit of allowing persons who are being questioned on his official. These are official decisions that he has made, and the alternates can conveniently say we have no knowledge of this, Mr. Congressman, and therefore the inquiry will not be able to move. With that point, I am going to await for the opportunity to officially ask the representatives of Director Domingo.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Congressman Mike Defensor.
Salamat po, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on that statement of Deputy Speaker Atienza, una po, I commiserate with Director General Domingo na intindihan ko naman no, na baka may sitwasyon talaga. But it's not just the inquiry, but we are in a state of emergency. The public health emergency is still on. At yung point person po natin sa FDA, wala po, no? Siya po yung nakatutok. But at any rate, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to reiterate that. But to follow up dun sa statement ni Deputy Speaker Atienza, on 2 occasions, Mr. Chairman, si Secretary Duque po hindi na ho umaattend sa hearings natin. Very critical po dito yung mga usapan, lalo tigit yung actions on policy ng Department of Health. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to find out if what would be the basis for the continued absence of the Secretary of Health, Mr. Chairman.
Like in the previous meeting, Congressman Mike, he has sent representative from one of his bureaus as Dr. Nika Howe of the Disease Prevention and Control Bureau and Dr. Melissa Guerrero of the Pharmaceutical Division. So those are his official representatives. We have not heard officially what his reason for not attending is. So that
With your,
is
yes, Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, ito po'y motu proprio hearing na po natin to eh. So what they are saying here are supposedly under oath, Mr. Chairman. So, well, number one, if there is a continued absence, I would request, Mr. Chairman, through you, that we write an official letter that in the next meeting, if they do not attend, then we can declare him in contempt. I'm sorry to say that, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Duque is a friend of mine, pero pagka po may absence, kasi po yung regulatory policy, FDA, pero yung overall policy on public health is coming from the Department of Health. And I don't think the undersecretaries can reply to the concerns, to the questions before this committee, Mr. Chairman, under your leadership. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that we write an official letter to the Department of Health, particularly Secretary Duque, so that we can, in the next hearing, declare in contempt if there will be, again, I do not want to say that the committee is being snubbed, but seemingly, yun po ang nangyayari. And in the case of FDA Domingo, Mr. Chairman, hindi ko alam how to treat this. This is an executive decision that has to be taken. Naintindihan ko po, may problema siya. But again, it is a public health emergency. With that, Mr. Chairman, I so move that we write an official letter through you, Mr. Chairman, to the good secretary regarding his absences in attending the committee hearings, particular concerns on our emergency public health situation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Chair.
Yes,
Yes,
yes, Congressman Johnny, you are recognized.
a letter addressed to Yusek Eric Domingo because I have some questions to him regarding some issues with the FDA.
I think, sir, Congressman Vice Chair Johnny, I think we should first let the representatives answer their concerns. If they do not have a credible answer, do not fit our expectations, then we can demand from those from their agency, namely in particular Yusek Domingo, to be here next time. So we have to make do first with what we have right now. Who are of us.
Representing Yusek Domingo or FDA?
Two of the Deputy Director Generals, Oscar Gutierrez and Ronald De Vera, and 4 other directors.
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll reserve my questions later.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge physically present, the Senior Vice Chair of this committee and Senior Deputy Majority Leader, Jesus Crispin Remulla. Via Zoom, Vice Chair Johnny Pimentel, Representative Joet Garcia, Representative John Marvin Nieto, and Minority Leader Stephen Paduano. First to interpolate in the list. Yeah, yes ko na. Walang nag-respond. Amen. Before the interpolation, Dr. Jody Dalmacion wants to give an opening statement on this topic. Yeah. Proposal on the topic at hand. So you are recognized, ma'am.
Can I give the presentation now?
Yes,
or,
yes.
Okay. Can I have the slides on, please? So I'm speaking as not as I'm a member of the Board of Medicine, but I'm not speaking as one. So can I have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Okay. Now, if a country or a region in the country wants to ask himself, are you prepared for a public health emergency? Okay. So we want to be objective in vetting that performance. So I have here what you call a top 10-point score, which was proposed in 2013 and formalized in 2014 by the United States. It's called National Health Security Preparedness Index. So kunyari, Philippines ka and you want to compare it with Vietnam, you should have a 10 for a perfect score. Now, there are 6 domains, if you can see that. The domains are health security, parang tinatanong mo, saan ba galing yung threat and paano ko i-stop ang spread. So, ang agency dito, can you turn? Ang agency dito ay dapat ang Bureau of Immigration. Okay? At saka yung IATF natin. So another domain is community planning. So yan yung LGU mo. Gusto mong isupport and say, ito yung magiging relationship ng community, no, civic organization, ng government at ng household, no, para ma-address mo yung threat. Pangatlo is I think that's countermeasures. Pag sinabi mong countermeasures, lahat, pati PPE, no, pati ventilator mo, hindi lang drugs, hindi lang vaccines, hindi lang biologicals, pati yung mga diagnostic test mo. So that's under the DOH or FDA. So it means you can store and deploy medical products to all areas that can manage or the threat. No? So yung pang-apat na domain is what you call incident and information management. Actually, yan din ay under DOH kasi nagbibigay ka ng advisory. So this is about the action on deployment of supply, money, people, and information to locality which will help address the threat. The fifth is healthcare delivery, also under DOH. Can you please turn on the next slide? And then the healthcare delivery means you have access to quality healthcare. And it is not only in the entire continuum of the health emergency. Hindi lang ito before, during, but even after. And the last one, can you go back please? Okay. And the last one is environment, no, and occupational health. Ibig sabihin nito, pag may emergency, i-detect mo kung merong contamination sa water, sa air, sa food. Kasi yung mga frontliner, kailangan protected din habang they are fighting the pandemic. So makikita po ninyo yung tatlo are under DOH, yung countermeasure, healthcare delivery, and incident and information. So kung yung focal person or the focal agency like DOH bungles up and there's no cohesiveness, we will not be able to manage any public health emergency. Okay, so the next slide, please. So, and then I think that's the old slide. I'm sorry. I sent something last night. All right. Well, anyway, no, you need to show the latest slide. I have it here.
Can we come back to you?
I'm sorry.
We like to acknowledge the presence, and next to be recognized is Dr. Jeremiah Belica, Director General.
ARTA.
Director General Belica.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, to our honorable congressmen. Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. I'm Director General, Attorney Jeremiah Belica of the Anti-Red Tape Authority. I would just want to give Mr. Chair a very quick update as requested by some of our honorable congressmen on the actions and recommendations of ARTA on the FDA. Mr. Chair, ARTA has several joint memorandum circulars that it executed together with the FDA to hasten the process of the goods and the things that are critical during this pandemic. But also, Mr. Chair, the recent show cause order that ARTA issued is particularly pertaining to a total of 413 pending applications from 22 complaint affidavits that ARTA received from various pharmaceutical stakeholders. Mr. Chairman, ang mga applications po na to na initial po na covered po ng mga affidavits ay mga applications for automatic renewals ng mga produkto. Meaning, Mr. Chairman, ito po ay hindi ho mga bagong application, pero ito po yung mga produkto na dati na pong existing sa market na hinihingi na lamang po na sila po ay mabagyan ng pagkakataon na makapagpatuloy ang kanila pong mga kanila pong produkto sa merkado. Mr. Chairman, just to give an understanding to the body, there are only 3 simple documents actually that are needed to approve this automatic renewal. First is the application form. Second is the proof of payment. And number 3 is an affidavit stating that no changes in the formulations were made. And according to the rules of the CDRR or the Center for Drug, these applications would already be automatically be renewed. But since 2019, since I started in ARTA, FDA, this particular process of automatic renewal has been a particular interest for ARTA because nakita ho namin na napakadami pa rin hong mga applications na hindi ho nila na-actionan despite na ito'y automatic renewals po. No? That's the reason why in 2019, ARTA already issued an order of automatic renewal of 3,120 25 pending applications for automatic renewal, and then also recently in January, on February 2021, we also issued a automatic renewal of 2,200 applications for automatic renewals. Subalit, in compliance with the ARTA's directive to the CDRR to give us a compliance report, they gave us a report na yung 2,000 po na pending application, isa na lamang daw po ang siyang natitira na hindi ho nila na-actionan. So after that compliance report that was given to us, we went to the organizations and to the industry to confirm whether isa na lamang po talaga ang siyang natitira. And what came back, Mr. Chair, is the 22 affidavits from the different stakeholders, totaling to 413 pending applications. And even as we speak, Mr. Chair, there are around a total of more than 2,000 applications na binigay po sa amin ngayon, pero hindi po lahat naka-affidavit. So we're requesting actually the industries and the pharmaceutical companies to give us an affidavit dun sa mga sinasabi nila na kulang pa po. But Mr. Chair, that is the status that of this show cause order. We gave them 7 working days to explain why an administrative case or even a criminal case should not be filed against the center. Particularly the director of the Center for Drugs, because sila po ang nag-approve ng mga applications, Mr. Chair. Also, Mr. Chair, we also gave several recommendations already to them. No, ang isa po dyan is maglagay po sila ng kanilang mga taong representative from the different centers doon po sa kanilang FDAP, doon po sa kanilang Food and Drug Assistance Center. Kasi nangyayari dyan, pagpunta po doon sa FDAP, ay it takes a while and then saka i-distribute sa mga centers. So it takes double or 3 times the time na bago po ito'y ma-actionan. And also, Mr. Chair, the pre-assessment period, Mr. Chair, is taking weeks and weeks, Mr. Chair. Dapat po yan, the pre-assessment, kung di ho nila tanggalin yan, it's a simple checklist lang po. Kumpleto po ba? Kung hindi, di kulang. Kung hindi po yan, Mr. Chair, ay dapat po nilang tanggapin. So anyway, Mr. Chair, these are some of the updates on the show cause order that ARTA did give or directed to the FDA, and we would be furnishing these documents, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Director General Belica, I have one question. The 7 days compliance, when will it end? What day?
This will be ending on May 23, Mr. Chair. Second working days, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. How about the verification of the reply of the FDA that there's one more pending among the 2,000 that is complained with you? Is that what is your final assessment on that? Is that true?
Mr. Chair, that's the reason why we came up with the show cause order, because nung pina-verify po namin yung listahan sa kanila, it turns out, Mr. Chair, na hindi lang pala isa. As far back as 2013 or 14, may mga pending pa po sila na for automatic renewals. So that's the reason why, Mr. Chair, we have the show cause order directed to the CDRR.
Thank you. I think Vice Chair Pimentel has a question.
For clarification to Director Belica, ilan pa po ang pending applications doon sa anti-automatic renewal na hindi pa na-actionan ng FDA?
Mr. Chair, doon po sa aming initial na pinadala na covered po ng affidavits is 413. Where meron pong iba pa ho na pumasok sa amin na reports, totaling I think around more than 2,000, pero wala pong mga affidavits, Mr. Chairman. So we are requesting actually that the affidavit should also come, because it's procedural po na magpadala kami ng show cause only if they have affidavits given to us already.
Okay, Mr. Chair, last question. Is it true, Director Belica, that there are 23 pharmaceutical companies that have filed a complaint against FDA with ARTA?
Initially, Mr. Chairman, yes, actually it's 22 initially. But with those who are coming right now, I think it's more than that, sir. Meron pa hong mga dumarating pa po, and that's yan po ang hinihingi po namin sa FDA. Huwag na ho nilang antayin, aksyonan na po nila yan, dahil automatic renewal lang po yan eh. There's really no analysis na mahirap pa ho dyan. Kailangan ho nilang ilabas na po yan mga yan.
Mr. Chair, are they liable for any administrative case with regards to this inaction of FDA?
If I may, Mr. Chair, if I may answer.
Yes,
thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Chair, based on Republic Act 11032 or Days of Doing Business Law, for the first violation, it's punishable by 6 months without pay. But for the second time, it is already dismissal from public service with imprisonment of 1 year to 6 years, and also forfeiture of benefits with a fine of 500,000 to 2 million pesos. But Mr. Chair, I just want to reiterate, we're not just talking about 2 applications here. We're talking about at least 413 right now, and there would be more to come if inaction would continue. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, last question na talaga. Have you filed a single administrative case with regards to this issue against FDA?
Not yet, Mr. Chairman, because the affidavits just came in. So that's the reason why for the show cause order, within 7 working days, Mr. Chair. So the 7 working days would be ending on the 23rd, and we would be ascertaining the veracity and even the substantial arguments that would be posited to our office, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I think ARTA should take action justice to pharmaceutical company. Automatic renewal yan since 2013, 8 years na lumipas. Wala pa rin silang action. Anyway, no more questions, Mr. Chair. I just hope that ARTA will take action on this because that is totally unfair to the companies. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We commit to that, Mr. Chair. It's our commitment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director General Belica. Before we end with you, may we request that you give us a copy of your recommendations on the actions taken and actions taken on the FDA to submit to the committee secretariat.
We will do, Mr. Chair. We will be submit. Can the chair give us 1 day, Mr. Chair, to submit
Yes,
everything?
we'll give you 1 week from today.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
one quick lang. Through you, Mr. Chair, DG, can you take a look na rin dun sa national guidelines versus ASEAN? Baka that would help us a lot. Para i-mandate na natin sila, ikaw kasama Congress, para we should really take a serious look at this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman.
We'll do pa.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Deputy Speaker Chensa.
yes, I would like to take advantage of this meeting and this opportunity to congratulate the Director General of ARTA, a very active, committed, patriotic Filipino in the person of Jeremiah Belica. Now he sees it in close-up, what is being talked about, whispered about, that the FDA tried giving him the runaround, telling him there was only one pending, and yet he finds out now that there are hundreds of applications not acted upon. So I'd like to take this opportunity to get from Director General Jeremiah, since he's a man on the spot now, the nation depends on a very efficient ARTA, anti-red tape administration, which could prevent a lot of corruption within government today. Ano po ba talaga ang pwede ninyong ipayo sa FDA? Dahil marami sa kanila dyan sa tanggapan na yan, ang paniniwala nila ay sila ang superpower. When they say go, go. When they say no go, yun, matutulog po sa kanilang tanggapan yung application. Ano po, may papayo nila ngayon? Even if the Director General of the FDA is not present, I'm sure he's monitoring it for his own information and guidance para po naman ma-improve natin ang FDA from what they're coming from now. If you have any advice to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our dear DS Mayor, sir, thank you for again giving me this opportunity. We already submitted our recommendations, pero payo po, no, bilang taong gobyerno, ayusin na ho natin, linisin po natin yan. Hinihiling ko po, tanggalin yung mga tao na nagpapatagal dyan, nahihirapan na po ang taong bayan. Ilang beses na po namin kayo kinausap dun sa mga proseso, wag ho natin bigyan ng dahilan ng tao kasi hindi ho nila maiintindihan yan kapag ang tao ay nahihirapan na po lalo na sa pandemya. So please, gawin po natin, linisin po natin, at yung mga ayaw ho at hindi ho nakipag-cooperate, mag-resign na lang ho kayo dyan.
Thank you, thank you. We'll continue now with Dr. Dalmacion with her presentation.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry about that.
Matagal pa po yan, mga ilang minutes kaya?
14 slides, sir.
14,
Kasi
okay.
napagalitan na ho niyo ko nun.
Nagtatanong lang.
Baka makat.
Hindi, dati kasi 30 plus eh.
Hindi, sir. Oo nga po, nakita yata niyo. So,
Si ano, quiz niyo.
yeah, okay, can we have the slides? Oh, this is clearer. So makikita po ninyo yung countermeasure, incident and information management, healthcare. Ay nandyan po yung DOH and specifically yung countermeasure is FDA. So next slide, can you
Okay, so yung 30 domains na yan ay under DOH. So pag walang cohesiveness, walang valid information na lumalabas sa field, mahihirapan po tayong makontrol ang pandemya sa susunod po. So hindi po tayo namamatay sa infection. Tayo po ay namamatay sa disease. So kunyari, ang ginawa po natin, airborne aerosol, tama po yan, no? Yung mask, hand washing, social distancing. Pero dapat napag-isipan mo, meron umaatake sa ating virus. So pag may umaatake sa'yo, ayaw mo papasukin. Okay, ano pa man siya. So, ngunit, ang mahirap dito, 80% ay asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. Pero ibig sabihin nun, yung 80%, they will progress to being severe. Okay? So, meron tayong special group dito. Kaya nga sa isang mathematical model, pinakita na ang Pilipinas, katulad ng Indonesia, Bangladesh, mababa ang case fatality rate niya. Dahil ang median age niya is 23 years old. Bata tayo. And in that mathematical model, nakita nila, merong tendency na mamatay more on the Northern Hemisphere. US, UK, Denmark, and so on. So sa atin, ang dami nating 20 to 40 years old. Ito yung low risk, ito yung hindi nagkakasakit, ngunit sila ang pwedeng asymptomatic. Ito ngayon ang pwedeng mag-umpisa ng herd immunity ninyo or the natural immunity. No? So mula doon sa 80% nun, 30% will be symptomatic. They can be mild, moderate, or severe. Out of the 240,000, 20% or 48,000 can become severe, and because you have a 2% case fatality rate, 9,600 ang mamamatay. Ang meron tayo ngayon is 1.3 million. Ano ang death natin? Halos 19,000. So it is double the expected. No? So yun ang tandaan natin. No? So yung hindi natin ina-address, pinapa-isolate natin. Hindi tama yung salitang quarantine. Ang quarantine galing sa labas. No? So yung Bureau of Immigration mo, IATF mo, yung LGU mo, kung sinong lumilipat from one region to another region, yun ang babantayan mo. Ngunit pag meron kang may sakit, huwag mo lang siyang pauwiin sa bahay. Yun ang wala tayo, yung home care treatment. Tapos yung testing tayo, wala din tayong testing. And so we don't have drug therapy. Ang nakalimutan natin pag nasa bahay, meron kang isang instrumento makakadetect kung ikaw ay lumalala. At napakamura po nito. Kung ito ay kasama sa home care, babaksak ko ang death natin. O yung tatakbo sa ospital pero hindi siya maa-admit. Okay? So, next slide please. So, lahat ng ating efforts nakasentro sa severe, na-overwhelm yung ating system, no? So, ngunit ang DOH, naglabas siya ng recommendation. Wala na nga tayong binigay na instruction sa home care natin. Nagbigay pa tayo ng isang recommendation na hindi siya gagamit ng isang drug na possibly can manage the mild and moderate. Okay? So, pag ikaw ay naglabas na recommendation, kailangan maliwanag sa DOH. Ano ba tanong niya? Hindi pwedeng, should ivermectin be used? Dapat, can it be used for prevention? Can it be used for mild moderate? No? So hindi pwedeng, pwede bang gamitin? Wala siyang testable question. Wala siyang, can it be used for younger age group? So wala siyang clear na research question at hindi naging exhaustive ang search niya for evidence. Lagi nating sinasabi, marami tayo ditong lawyer, the absence of evidence does not mean it does not exist. Hindi mo lang siya mahanap. Okay? So, dito sa 6 na study na pinagbabatayan nila ng rekomendasyon, 2 dito binasa ko, pinagtiyagaan kong balikan yung recommendation which was issued in March 17. At sinasabi ko nga, lagi kong sinasabi, hindi pa panahon para magbigay ng practice guideline kasi nag-i-evolve pa ang information. Ngayon, ang sinasabi ko dito sa 2 study nito, yung Lopez Medina, sinabi nung naglabas ng recommendation, ito ay magandang study. Okay? Ngunit nung binasa ko, meron ng reklamo sa kanya for protocol violation na ibigay niya ng ivermectin sa placebo. So 75 nakatanggap ng ivermectin kaysa placebo. Hindi din sila nag-blind. Yung pharmacist, alam niya kung anong binibigay niyang ivermectin at binibigyan ng placebo. Pangatlo, nag-iba sila ng endpoint. Kasi wala silang nakikita na lumalala after the randomization. Sabi nila, teka, palitan na natin, bilangin na lang sino ang gumaling after 21 days. Hindi po pwedeng ganon ang research. Okay? So wala din siyang allocation concealment. Kaya nga po nalaman ng pharmacist na nakabigay siya ng mali, dahil siya alam niya kung sino ang nakakatanggap ng Ivermectin at placebo. Because of that, kinumplain ang JAMA. Bakit ka naglabas ng ganitong napakapangit na study? No? So it is poor quality. So ito po ay just a systematic review. Ang pinaka-highest level of evidence pag wala kang randomized clinical trial is a meta-analysis. So we call a systematic review a qualitative review. Parang kwento lang. So pag wala kang research question, hindi siya systematic. It is a narrative review or a scoping review. So, bali sa sinasabi ko, mahirap pagbatayan ito ng isang agency katulad ng Department of Health that controls the pandemic, the solutions to the pandemic, no? So, next slide, please. Okay. Ito ngayon pinapakita ko, pag ikaw ay gumawa ng systematic review or anumang research, kailangan panindigan mo siya. So, kailangan makita natin ang sino ang author. Diba? So, ang author dito sa systematic review ng PSMID ay dalawa dito ay master candidate, master of clinical epidemiology candidate. Okay lang po yan kung may supervision siya, wala namang mali doon. So, 6 ang authors dito, doon ibinigay ko sa kabila yung kay study ni Lori para may comparison, no? So meron bang dating publication itong mga batang ito? Wala akong alam. Pero itong si Lori ay isang consultant ng WHO at talagang meron siyang consultancy for evidence-based medicine. Meron bang declaration of conflict of interest? Nung binasa ko po yung April 10 version nila, kasi po wala po kayong mababasa pag
Mr. Chairman, muted. Mr. Chairman.
Technical staff, is it already unmuted? They cannot hear. Okay na daw.
Okay. So ang funding source po nito ay galing sa PCHRD na arm ng DOST. So kailangan government to government ang bayaran ng pera. Yung kabila self-funded. Ito po yung pagkakaiba nitong systematic review na ito or meta-analysis kung ano man ang tawag nila ngayon sa April 10. Should ivermectin be used for the treatment of COVID-19 infection? Sa kabila, to assess the efficacy of ivermectin treatment or prophylaxis among people with or at high risk of COVID. So pwede po dito na-expose ka, PUI ka, ang kasama mo sa bahay, positive. Nung araw, hindi kayo nagpa-positive. Kunyari, 5 kayo sa bahay, 2 lang ang Ngayon lahat kayo because of the variant. Kaya kailangan mo talaga ng post-exposure treatment. Kailangan kang uminom para ma-prevent ka. Which of course, the vaccine you're saying now can prevent you after the second dose. Okay? So, ilan ang studies na retrieve nila? 218. Yung kabila, 670. So, ibig sabihin nito, hindi talaga sila naka-retrieve ng madaming papers. Now, exhaustiveness of the search is very important to give a valid result. Now, out of the 16, 6 ang sinama nila. Ngunit sa search nila, ang dami nilang sinama na mga systematic review, guidance that can bias you. Bakit? Kasi naglabas na ang WHO eh. Sinabi niya, I don't recommend. So you don't read that because it can bias you. So, non-English language, hindi din niya sinama yung non-English. Pero itong kabila, sinama yung mga Chinese database. Tandaan natin, nang galing ito sa China, November pa, nag-aaral na sila tungkol sa sakit na ito. So, nag-contact ba sila ng authors para ipaliwanag ano ba yung nangyari sa research mo? Tama ba itong binilang mong namatay? Tama ba itong binilang mo na gumaling na? Wala po silang ginawang ganon. Wala po rin ako nakitang protocol. Ang protocol po kasi ng isang systematic review ay gagawin mo bago ka gumawa ng review para hindi ka mabias at magpalit ng mga endpoints mo. So wala po akong alam na protocol na naka-register sa Cochrane. And was there a possible bias? Yes, because if you don't have a protocol on what studies you will include or exclude, you will be changing the methods that you will use along the review. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So I will not belabor the issue, no? Next slide. Okay. I will not belabor the issue, pero sasabihin ko lang dito. Ang lumabas po, there is 70% reduction of death doon sa mga mild and na gumamit ng COVID, na mga COVID-19 patients na gumamit ng Ivermectin. 70% reduction. Okay? So ang confidence interval doon is 88% to 27%. So maski sabihin mo, hindi ako naniniwala dito, baka 27%. Malaking bagay na ang 27% na prevent mong namatay. You are talking about death here. Okay. So pag tiningnan mo, ano ang pinaka-imprecise? Ibig sabihin, ang lawak ng kanyang confidence. Meron siyang reduction of death by around 76%, ngunit nagpupunta siya across one. No? Ito yung Lopez Medina. So kung sasabihin mo, ano ba yung study dyan na mali, no? Na very imprecise, no? Tatanggalin mo yung Lopez Medina na isinama nila. Okay? So sabi nila, napaka-heterogeneous. Ay ibig sabihin nun, ang daming study, iba-iba ang mga resulta, which you expect in meta-analysis. Kasi dito, ito yung April version nila. No? Ngunit, hindi ka ngayon magme-meta-analysis. Pag nakita mo napaka-imprecise and inconsistent at mataas ang heterogeneity. Ngunit dapat sa umpisa pa lang, sasabihin mo, tatanggapin ko ang heterogeneity na 60%. Hindi yung sa gitna ng study, saka mo sasabihin, uy, heterogeneous siya, hindi ko to tatanggapin. Magiging bias ka na nun. So, dito 56% ang heterogeneity. Ang tingin ko dito, ang pinakamalaking source of bias is the Lopez Medina study. Kita naman ninyo yung linya, lumampas sa 1, which means hindi na siya protective. It's not favoring anymore Ivermectin. Next slide, please. Okay. Ang isa pa nilang, next slide, ang isa nilang nakalimutan ay yung dose. Nakita dito na pag mataas ang dose mo, okay, mas protected ka kaysa low dose. Okay? So ang protection mo with the high dose is almost 92%. Those numbers cannot lie. Okay? And ang heterogeneity mo is 0%. No? So, yung kinonbine mong study ay napakalapit sa isa't isa. Next slide, please. So, next slide. So, what is certain about this systematic? I am talking of the first systematic review. But what I showed you is the April 10 version na nagkaroon na sila ng 9 studies. What is certain is that the assessment of quality of at least 2 studies is erroneous and seriously flawed. The reduction of death from COVID-19 with Ivermectin was totally ignored with the high dose. The preprints, if competently assessed for quality, will not give serious bias. Anong bias ang magbibigay? Pag alam mo kung anong binibigay mo, pag walang placebo at binago mo yung endpoint mo, yun ang mga bias. Okay? Pero kung sinabi mo, ito preprint, ikaw na nga ang nag-peer review. Huwag mong bigay na sabihin na hindi yan na peer review. Ikaw ang peer. So the I2 of 56% is moderate heterogeneity according to Cochrane, and reviewers can do subgroup analysis. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Ihahatiin ko siya doon sa severe and moderate na COVID, baka iba resulta, o hahatiin ko versus the doses. Okay. Ang ginawa nila, nag-subgroup sila according to the quality of paper. Now, this is already a moot issue, I tell you, because there are already several meta-analyses in existence and increasing that is pointless already to use the mere systematic review as a basis for recommendation of treatment. Okay? So now even WHO is severely criticized by many for revising its own meta-analysis done by its own researchers and consultants. And this is the study of Andrew Hill. So, kung ako'y nakabasa nito at ako ang Department of Health, next slide please, ano sasabihin ko? Kunyari, hindi ko pa alam itong Ivermectin sa totoo lang nung March. ang sasabihin ko, there is low to moderate certainty of events for reducing cost of death, all cost of death. Kasi pwede kang mamatay for anything by 70%, and the confidence lies between 88% to 27% for mild to moderate COVID-19. Okay? With a significance of p-value of 0.008. So, tsumamba ka lang. Sasabihin lang, ay, tsumamba ka lang. Sumamba po ako by 0.0008. No? And your I2 is 56. There is low certainty for reducing death from mild to moderate with the high doses. Okay? Then, I will recommend the use of ivermectin for mild and moderate na napakaganda pag nasa bahay ka at naka-home care ka, and more clinical trials to do dose response and use of ivermectin in severe diseases using an adaptive trial. So, hindi mo sinushoot down yung gamot, no? And you may study the ivermectin for asymptomatic and post-exposure using the traditional RCT. Ngayon, ano ang lumabas nila sa adverse reaction? Walang lumabas na adverse reaction even from the high dose. Okay. So, baliwala, next slide please. Next slide please. Baliwala ang statistical analysis. Okay? Dahil statistics lang yan. So, anong gagawin natin? Idadilhin natin siya sa decision making sa konteksto ng pandemic. Okay? Baliwala yung statistics mo. It's useless if you don't contextualize it to the pandemic. So, sinabi mo, hindi effective ang ivermectin, ngunit safe siya. Effective ang oxygen. Okay? So, next slide please. Ipaki-press po. Okay. Anong nababasa ninyo? Meron ka lang sinasabing effective treatment for serious illness. For serious illness. Ngayon, yung hydroxychloroquine, wag na natin pag-usapan yon kasi talagang walang efficacy and it's not safe. It can cause arrhythmia and so on. Okay? So, can you please, so yan lahat severe. Anong gagawin mo? Maghihintay ka ma-ospital? Wala kang gagawin sa mild and moderate? Next slide, please. Can you just, so you are missing, no? There is a missing intervention, no? It's you are missing managing the asymptomatic, the mild and moderate COVID-19 cases. Ngunit, next slide, pag nilagay mo siya under effective at nilagay mo siya ng safe, next slide, na-cover mo na lahat. You, in a very brass language, you covered your ass for everything. Okay? So, okay. So that, manapapansin ba ninyo, ang budesonide, DEXA, are all repurposed. They were not meant to treat COVID-19. Tosi for multiple sclerosis, no, for other disease. DEXA, pwede sa hiccup. Ako, ginagamit ko as an obstetrician pag premature yung baby, no? So these are all repurposed. They are not intended being used for its intention, original intention. Mapapansin nyo, anong pinaka-safe? Libre, oxygen, lalagay mo lang sa tangke. Anong pinakagaling sa lupa? Ivermectin. So if you will listen to nature, everything is very easy to manage. Okay, next slide please. Ngayon, sabi ko nga sa inyo, baliwala yung statistics po pag hindi mo konteksto, you did not contextualize it according to the pandemic. Okay? Sabi natin, binalikan ko yung systematic review nila, ginamit ko yung relative risk reduction of death. Okay? Ibig sabihin nito, ito yung marireduce na death, 2%, sa kabila, mamamatay pa rin 9% sa placebo. Okay? Ito yung tinatawag naming numbers needed to treat. Ito yung dami ng tao na kailangan mong gamutin para ma-save mo ang isang buhay. So you need 15. Okay? Okay? So, pag meron kang 20,000, masisave mo 20,000, mind you, na halaga ng isang gamot na alam nating mahal for severe, na hindi pa effective pag hindi mo binigay sa right timing, na hindi pa effective pag walang dexamethasone, yung gamot na yon. Ito, bigyan mo lang sa halagang 200 ang isang tao, 100, 20,000 yon, sa 15 na yon, numbers needed to treat, 7 ang hindi mamamatay. So, ang mura niya. Okay? So, next slide, please. This is what you call combining evidence, next slide please, Next slide, please. Natutulog siya. Next, your evidence is useless. No? Your evidence should be combined with clinical expertise. Bakit ka namamatay? Namamatay ka ba sa nagre-replicate na virus? Hindi. Namamatay ka dahil sa cardiac death, sa very severe pulmonary disease. No? Namamatay ka dahil nasisira yung kidney mo. No? Namamatay ka dahil nag-heart attack ka. So those are clinicians. No? So ang final nito, sa konteksto ng clinical expertise, you have to consider the patient. The contract is still between the physician and the patient even during a pandemic. And use the available evidence during that time, which can be maybe a systematic review and small RCTs. Even expert opinion, ito yung lagi kong sinasabi sa mga estudyante. Ang expert opinion, panahon ni Hippocrates, panahon ni Salk na nakadiskubre ng polio vaccine, ay walang evidence-based medicine. It was purely empirical. Yan ang science. Ang evidence-based lang, ginawa mong systematic yung pag-gather ng evidence and you did some very sophisticated statistical manipulation, or not manipulation, analysis. So remember, death from COVID is not from the infection but the disease. And COVID-19 active treatment is driven by the most vulnerable group with the highest incidence of disease and fatality and the asymptomatic carrier. Kasi kung sa gera pa, sabi ni Congressman Marcoleta, hindi mo nakikita yung kalaban mo. Ang kalaban mo pala ay espiya. Okay, so next slide. Now we go to FDA. Now what I'm saying here is if you have a wrong basis for a treatment recommendation, you will have a problem. Okay, eto ngayon, tayo ay gumagawa ng drug dahil it is pharma-driven. Katulad ng erectile dysfunction, baldness, di ba? Hindi naman nakakamatay yon, but there are drugs for that. Now, una, you have animal study and investigational new drug. And then you have final approval. Ang Pilipinas, meron lang siyang certificate of product registration. Ang Amerika, merong market authorization. Okay? Now, dahil sa AIDS epidemic, gumawa sila ng accelerated pathway. Ang ibig sabihin nun, habang nagre-research, pinapagamit mo na yung gamot sa mga may sakit. Okay? So, at the same time, because of the emergency, this is the natural. Next slide, please. Anong nangyari? Dumating si COVID. Next slide. Okay. So, wala ito sa atin. If you will see, we have no accelerated pathway and we don't have an expanded access. Ang ibig sabihin ng expanded, tinatawag din yan compassionate. Ibig sabihin nun, habang nag-research at tinigil yung research, lumala yung sakit ng isang volunteer, ibabalik mo sa kanya, bibigyan mo siya ng drug. Okay? Ano ang meron tayo? Meron tayong certificate of special permit, compassionate special permit. Ano ang special permit na to? Ito ay rehistradong gamot sa ibang bansa. No? Hindi ito unregistered. Ngunit hindi siya rehistrado sa Pilipinas. At sa tatlong sakit lang siya pwede. Yung cancer, life-threatening, rare diseases, and AIDS. No? So hindi totoo na ito po ay registered sa ibang bansa. Okay? So, next slide please. Dumating si pandemic. Okay. Ang ating health emergency, tandaan natin to, lalo na sa DOH, hindi lang biological. Ay meron ding chemical, radiation, and nuclear. So, we can go next. Okay. So, lumabas si EUA dahil sa pandemic. Ano ang emergency use utilization? It is separate, no? It is separate in a different entity from your CSP. Magkaiba siya, wag mo siyang isasama. It is an approved drug for an unapproved indication, no? Katulad ng tocilizumab, or it is an unapproved drug for countermeasure katulad ng vaccine. Okay? So ito yung repurpose. Next slide. Okay na. Ito na yung huling slide ko. Baka magalit si Congressman Naglipay. Okay?
Hindi, si DSBH yun.
So, ito po, sir. Binalikan ko yung sinabi ng President Duterte natin na meron kang Executive Order 121. Ikaw, Director General, pwede kang mag-release ng Emergency Use Authorization. Huwag kang mag-split ng hair na gagawa ka pa ng drug emergency use. Dahil ang ibig sabihin ng emergency utilization ay lahat ng countermeasure, pati yung COVID test mo. So you don't split hair, even the mask, even the gloves. Okay? Ngayon, nakalagay doon sa Circular 2020, tama si Director General Domingo. Wala siyang pinaghuhugutan na law katulad sa Amerika na meron silang Pandemic and All Hazard Preparedness Act, no? Ngunit at that same time binigyan siya ng kapangyarihan. So ang tingin ko, hindi ka pwedeng mag-cut and paste. Pabayaan mo si Compassionate Special Permit. Magkaiba siya sa Emergency Use Authorization. Now, yung circular ng FDA 2020-36, yung condition for issuance of EUA is still under a non-pandemic context, no? You have to adapt, okay? Ngayon, kinat and paste na naman nila yung guidance ng Amerika na totality of evidence. Actually, this is the totality of risk and benefit. So nagkamali sila sa pag-cut and paste because this was actually the exact word in the US FDA. Now, ang sinasabi ng US FDA, you don't need randomized clinical trial, no? If you really need to intervene, no, what you have to look at the most effective, no? Saka, and then ongoing yung pagkuha mo. So, yung mga binigay na circular ng FDA unfortunately did not adjust, no? And the process is still bureaucratic. Matagal pa rin. Ang dami niyang sasubmit. Ang sabi sa US, don't submit anything. We will even allow dispensing of people who are not allowed to dispense. We will even empower FDA to extend expiration. We will permit FDA to waive applicable GMP. So yun ang sa Amerika. No? Now, again, nakalagay doon sa circular nila, ang magdi-decide kung ang isang drug ay pwedeng bigyan ng EUA ay ang expert panel na naman. Kailangan kung kumuha sila ng expert panel, hindi na dapat transparent and these people should have strength in reviewing pharmaceutical products. Then this is my the FDA should have scientists. Yung pinakamababang na abot dapat ng isang head ng center is a PhD in pharmaceutical science. That is a must. And then ang FDA should not depend on expert. Kasi nasa UP pa ako, kami nasa NIH, gumawa sila ng temporary expert. Hindi pwede. Dapat ma-institutionalize mo itong scientist na to sa loob ng FDA. And they should not have any conflict of interest. So my ending slide will be...
Dr. Jody, sorry Mr. Chair. Gusto ko lang may maintindihan kanina bago. Ano yung gusto ko maintindihan sa sabi mo, do not split hairs, yung sa DEU tsaka EUA. Can you expound on that one?
Kasi ma'am, sinasabi niyo pwede ba to sa drug emergency? Actually, kasama sa drugs, ang emergency use authorization. Kaya ang big definition niya is countermeasure. Pag sinabi mong countermeasure, kasama pati mask, ventilator, drugs, biological, vaccines, diagnostic test, hindi ka mag-i-split ng hair. You don't say na, pwede ba to sa drug EU? Hindi. Kasama po siya sa buong countermeasure. Come up with this recommendation, no, from DOH. Hindi ba dapat nagkaroon ng stakeholder involvement? What is the accountability of the other medical societies and PMA? And wouldn't it have been wiser for PCHRD to fund a clinical trial involving Filipino patient? Kasi kung ako yung Secretary of Health, titingnan ko to, teka, pwede natin gamitin to sa mild and moderate. I-monitor natin. Sabihin natin sa mga gagamit, magbigay ng monitoring, magbigay ng updates, no? Maggagawa ako ng paper, maggagawa ako ng form, na tinatawag na patient form. Pero teka, pag-aralan natin ito sa severe, or pag-alalan natin to sa health workers natin na nai-expose, na nagtatrabaho sa loob ng ospital, halos 24 hours na merong COVID na binabantayan. So, hindi pwedeng nakakita ka lang ng isang analysis, there is an action. You have to think very carefully of that action because evidence is useless if you don't contextualize it in the present pandemic. You have patient preference because that is our Hippocratic oath. The primary consideration is the patient's health and well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dalmacion, for your very informative presentation. In light of our time constraints, may I request the four others, the resource persons, to limit their presentation to 8 minutes, because we have around 7 congressmen who want to interpolate the resource persons. So next, to give her opening statement is Dr. Elena Quino. Ma'am, you are recognized. Please limit to 8 minutes. Dr. Elena, not here? Not here? Okay. Dr. Rafael, Dr. Quino? Yes. Do you have a prepared opening statement?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Congressman Mike.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yung pong present kasi ni Dr. Dalmacion, napakaganda po no, yung processes and yung the critique on the PISMID guidelines. Baka maganda ho, unahin natin yung PISMID para they can also make a presentation para mamaya sa discussion on the policy on how to treat it. Para kung meron hong presentation PISMID. Because I can see a lot of members from PISMID who are here with us, Mr. Chairman. Salamat po.
Thank you, Congressman Mike.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yes, I know that Dr. Alejandria from PSMID is present, so maybe we could recognize her so that they could also present to us on their justification regarding the statement that the issue on the recommendation and the comment on Dr. Jody Dalmacion's presentation.
Okay, Dr. Marisa Alejandria, you are recognized. Please limit your statement to 8 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chair,
Good morning.
Honorable Chair, Honorable Representatives of the House. Thank you for this opportunity for us to share with you the process, the science that we use in developing the COVID-19 living recommendations. I'm with Professor Leonila Dance and Professor Antonio Dance. We are all from the University of the Philippines, and I'm with the Institute of Clinical Epidemiology. Professor Leonila Dance is with the Department of Clinical Epidemiology, and we also have Dr. Tony Dance, who is also a director of the Asia Pacific Center for Evidence-Based Healthcare. So this Living CPG was developed in cooperation with the Philippine Society for Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, the lead convener, and then the UP Manila Institute of Clinical Epidemiology, together with the Asia Pacific Center for Evidence-Based Healthcare, plus 20 other professional stakeholder groups were involved in the development of this guideline. So to just put into context the process of CPG development, I'll give you the overall process on how we come up with recommendations, not just for ivermectin, but for all the interventions that are being used in COVID-19. Why do we need clinical practice guidelines? In this pandemic, together with the cases, we also have an infodemic of information, misinformation, disinformation. And if you do a search of the Medline database, there are more than 100,000 studies already that have been published since the start of the pandemic. And if you look at the WHO global literature, it's more than 200,000 studies, and that's about 21 studies every hour that we need to review. And this is the challenge with a new disease. The evidence is evolving, and it is both a positive development because we are able to appraise these new studies, and as such, our methodology needs also to be adaptive and agile with the evolving evidence. So in the early part of the pandemic, that's in January, February, March, we infectious disease practitioners had to come up with interim guidance for our clinicians. We came up with interim algorithms, guidelines on infection control, guidelines on management, together with the Philippine College of Physicians, Philippine Hospital Infection Control Society. To be able to develop this interim guidance, we had to be agile in the development of systematic review. So we adapted the rapid evidence review process, and this was done through our students, graduates on clinical epidemiology. So we asked them, they all volunteered to review the evolving evidence under the Institute of Clinical Epidemiology and Asia Pacific Center for Evidence-Based Healthcare. And this were the initial basis for the guidance that we came up in March. And then we since then have been updating our guidelines based on evolving evidence. So we had one in July, November, and now we have this living CPG. Just to appraise everyone on what is a clinical practice guideline. These are evidence-based recommendations for individual patient-level decision-making intended to optimize patient care, and it's based on systematic review of evidence and assessment of the benefits and harms of alternative care options. Our overall goal is to improve the quality of healthcare by reducing variations in clinical practice, ensuring efficient use of limited resources, avoiding harmful interventions. So we want to avoid overuse, misuse, underuse of potentially effective interventions, or avoiding overuse of potentially harmful or costly interventions. Okay. So the traditional clinical practice guideline process takes about a year or so to come up with clinical practice guidelines, and it has these 4 steps: preparation, evidence synthesis, evidence to decision, dissemination, and evaluation. With the rapidly evolving evidence now with this pandemic, because of this new disease, we modified and adopted the living CPG model. And the added step is the regular surveillance of research evidence. Okay. So that in this, by adopting a living CPG model, we optimize the guideline development process to allow updating of individual recommendations as soon as relevant new evidence becomes available. And then there are 3 groups in a guideline development process, whether traditional or the living CPG model. We have the steering committee, the technical working group or evidence review experts, and the consensus panel. The steering committee is the one responsible for identifying and prioritizing the clinical questions, ensuring that the questions are properly formulated, and these are the ones that are needed for clinical practice. The steering committee also identifies the consensus panel, the technical working groups, and they are the ones that reviews and manages the conflicts of interest of these teams. So all members of the CPG project have to declare their conflicts of interest in the past 4 years, and those with significant personal or financial conflicts of interest will not be allowed to participate in the CPG process. So all of these have to be declared. And then the next step after the preparation is the evidence review process. So this is the main part of the CPG development, wherein we now appraise the literature. And this is done by our evidence review experts who are trained on clinical epidemiology, how to appraise evidence. And it starts with formulation of a focus review question, literature search, data extraction, appraisal of the quality of the included studies, qualitative and quantitative evidence synthesis with assessment of heterogeneity. All of these processes are done in duplicate, independent by at least 2 reviewers. And then the appraisal of the quality of the evidence.
2 minutes. Thank you.
Great. Okay,
Ma'am, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Yes, Congressman Mike.
Yes, Doktora, with all due respect po, kasi po, these are the process and thank you for that. Pero siguro ilang points lang po na para masagot yung kay Doktora Dalmacion because she made a study on your paper on PISMID. Ang binanggit po niya, and if pwede yung masagot, number one, it was hastily released, that the Lopez Medina is a poor study, that meta-analysis is in fact superior than the study that you have conducted. She also mentioned the credentials of Lori vis-a-vis, relatively to the ones that conducted the studies. The numbers of studies retrieved, sinabi po niya dito na sa atin daw pong study, walang preventive. On the moderate and mild, wala din po. Severe lang po yung ginawa natin study. And then on the basis of that, nakita niya yung 76 reduction on death and 92% sa high dose. At binanggit din po niya dito yung WHO, criticize niya yung parang pagpapalit ng formulation for the meta-analysis studies. Baka po yun ang pwedeng masagot ninyo para lang ho klaro.
Sir Chair,
Yes, DS Marcoleta.
with all due respect to Kong Mike Defensor, Mr. Chair, I think we should now proceed to the questioning because we can.
Is that a motion?
They can answer.
I withdraw my
Are
proposal.
you proposing a motion or is a normal request?
I move, Mr. Chair, that we proceed with the questioning already because all these explanations are nothing to us. We need to ask them questions on the basis of what they are presenting to us.
Mr. Chair, I withdraw my...
There's a pending motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I withdraw.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Congressman Mike, we need to settle first the motion,
Yeah.
then we can come back to you.
No, Mr. Chair, just to, because that was on the presentation, I wanted the points to be raised, but I withdraw my suggestion, Mr. Chair, and go through with the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, sorry,
Yes.
if I may, for this, Marcoleta, may mga magpa-present pa kasi so that you could ask more questions. But of course, I defer to you if you don't want them to present anymore. Para lang you have also sana basis of questions to the resource persons. But they are here. But it's up to the pleasure of this Deputy Speaker Marcoleta if he doesn't want to listen to the other presenters anymore, Mr. Chair.
Actually, he has been texting me for 1 hour already. I'd say that he is already decided.
Mr. Chair, if I may lang po.
Yes,
Kung
Congressman
may-
Mike.
Yes, kung may magpe-present pa pala po, kasi sa records ng Congress po to, if I may request our good Deputy Speaker, Congressman Marcoleta, baka po pwede ilagay lang natin sa record para lang, kung meron pa ho, kasi kala ko wala na, that's why I was withdrawing because they were not answering the points raised by the Dr. Dalmacion, which are very critical points. Pero kung meron pa ho magpe-present, baka po, for the record na lang po para mailagay sa record ng Committee on Good Government. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There is a motion duly seconded. We on the motion is to stop the questioning and proceed to stop the presentation and proceed to the interpolation. So,
Mr. Chair, that
any objection?
Mr. Chair, can we hear from Deputy Speaker Marcoleta? Baka naman magbagong isip ni Deputy Speaker Marcoleta or maybe to, pwede rin let's hear first from Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
Deputy Speaker, you have the pending motion. Do you want to pursue your pending motion?
I will just modify my motion. I will accept their position papers or memoranda they will submit to the committee, and then we shall now proceed to questioning.
Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. All resource persons, namely Dr. Eliza Quino, Dr. Rafael Castillo, Attorney Lorna Frances Filipino, and Dr. Benigno Agbayani are hereby requested to submit to the committee their position papers on the matter. And any corresponding presentations on this matter.
Mr. Chair, may we also request Dr. Alejandria also to submit their position paper para on record.
Dr. Alejandria and Dr. Dalmacion, can we receive copies of your presentation to be submitted to the committee? Thank you po.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe that supposed to be Dr. Alan Landrito also was supposed to present that. Let us also put on record and ask his presentation na lang po to be put on record. Thank you.
Dr. Landrito, if you are present or any of his representatives may request that you submit a copy of your presentation or position paper. Thank you. Next on the agenda is interpolation of the resource persons by members. First to interpolate is Deputy Speaker Bernadette Herrera.
Thank you.
DSBH, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yung unang tanong ko po is of course addressed to FDA with regards to ano na po ang position nila with regards dun sa pag-follow sa national guidelines versus the ASEAN, because this would really help a lot in declogging yung pila ng lahat ng pending applications with FDA. So may I hear from FDA with regards to this matter, Mr. Chair?
Yes, may we request the representative of the FDA, the Deputy Director General.
Apo. Good afternoon po, Honorable Chair. May I call on the Director of the CDRR po to report on the FDA position paper on the ACTD and the National Guide. Thank you po. Si Director Joyce Sirunay po.
Director Joyce Silonay.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and thank you, Honorable Congressman Herrera D. For the 1997 National Guidelines and the 2016 ASEAN Common Technical Documents, ASEAN Common Technical Requirements, we have prepared a presentation, but with the motion given earlier, we are going to provide the honorable committee of this presentation and the position paper. For the 1997 national guidelines, this is on the basis that there was already a signed document, because this is for the 1997 and the ASEAN Common Technical Document requirements. The ASEAN Common Technical Document is based on a commitment of the Philippines to the Association of Southeast Asia Nation. There are documents to it that we can share to the Honorable Chair that form basis for the implementation. In jest, the 1997 National Guidelines is a loose guidelines compared to the ASEAN Common Technical Document, ASEAN Common Technical Requirements. One is this: the Philippines is one of the three countries that are producing pharma products. If we're going to return to the 1997 National Guidelines, then the products that are coming from the Philippines is no longer compliant to the ASEAN Common Technical Documents, ASEAN Common Technical Requirements, which is at the ASEAN level. Second, it will form a technical barrier to trade because there is already an agreement within the ASEAN member state on these requirements. However, during the times of the pandemic, the Food and Drug Administration, through our principal, DG Domingo, has been issuing facilitated registrations and pathways that will allow products that are used for the management of COVID to be expedited. One of which is the certificate of product registration for Ivermectin. So for the return to the 1997 national guidelines versus the uh, 2016 ASEAN Common Technical Documents, the position of FDA, as approved by our Director General, is to retain the ASEAN Common Technical Documents, ASEAN Common Technical Requirements, but facilitate the COVID-related applications that will allow availability of these products, but on a different pathway, not through the national, the 1997 national guidelines requirements for the registration of products.
Mr. Chair, with all due respect to
Yes.
Dr. Serunay, Mr. Chair, through you, ma'am, hindi ko naman po sinasabing bumalik tayo, but I'm just saying we pause first with regards to this one. Kasi pandemya po tayo ngayon. We are in a pandemic. Kailangan po natin ng masusunod po natin yung para po sa ating sariling bansa. We have to support also, syempre, our manufacturers here in the Philippines. Kaya ang sinasabi natin, let's pause for that. It's a commitment, yes, pero syempre hindi naman natin uunahin ng diplomasya bago ang kapakanan ng ating mamamayang Pilipino. At ang isa pa po, pag mag-export po siguro ang ating mga kumpanya, then they follow the ASEAN. Pero syempre kung dito naman dahil nga may commitment po tayo with other member states. Pero kung matagal na po nating napapakinabangan yung national guidelines, naniniwala ko it's more than enough para gamitin natin, especially in this time of pandemic. Ako sana po, I appeal that you look into it. Kung hindi man, paano nyo po mapapabilis ang proseso sa ating mga applications ngayon, especially for COVID-related, because it's still not yet that fast. Can you give us that commitment na kaya nyong pabilisin yan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Can I respond?
Yes, we may proceed, Director.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and congrats, Honorable Chair, and thank you very much, Honorable Herrera D. Yes, ma'am, we have facilitated the fastest of which was the EUAs, and we have COVID-related products that are being issued a certificate of product registration, and for COVID-related preparations under the compassionate special permit, it's 24 hours because we facilitate it by making it first to be online. Anything that is COVID related, our principal, DG Domingo, has been facilitating everything so that the products will be made use by the management, by our frontliners in the management of COVID. Rest assured, ma'am, we are facilitating it, including we are, one more, can I, the drug emergency use is not being revised, and we are putting the drug shortages. So we are revisiting it as well so that it will be more responsive to the need of our fellow Filipinos that are now stricken with COVID, and for the management of COVID by our frontliners. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, TS.
Yes, Madam, pwede ko bang malaman kung ano yung mga bagong drugs na nilagay nyo under DEU, and is there a possibility that Ivermectin can be put on this list? And then Leronlimab or yung others na COVID-related na mga bago na nakikita natin?
Honorable Chair, can I?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you.
Director.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Congressman Herrera D. It is baricitamib, dexamethasone, and tocilizumab. Those are the ones with under drug for emergency use at the moment.
To you, Mr. Chair, bakit po hindi na-approve as EUA? May nag-apply po ng EUA, yung Kioma, I think the Kioma group applied for EUA for, bakit po sila na-disapprove?
Please answer, Director.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. For the application under doc tracking number 2021-40514416, the application on emergency use authorization, the documents being provided were for COVID treatment. The EUA application was for COVID treatment, but the documents provided were inconsistent with the materials that they have provided. So they are saying that their EUA application. So I will just read so that I will not have a misquotation. No EUA approval for any of the listed NRAs eligible for reliance. No English translation and no actual approval on the application from another country. And then the indication applied for is EUA is inconsistent with the labeling materials, which is as an anti-helminthic.
So parang sinasabi niyo, ma'am, through you, Mr. Chair, pagka, kunwari, in the case of Ivermectin, if it's going to be applied for COVID, kaya hindi siya mailalagay as EUA because you don't agree with that one?
For the application for EUA, which is for the management of COVID per FC 2020-036, they have to have proof, clinical trial phase 3 interim to trigger the EUA.
Mr. Chair, through you, tanong ko lang si Dr. Jody, wala pa ba tayong clinical trial phase 3?
Dr. Jody, please reply.
Sorry, sir. Kung tinatanong nila clinical trial locally, I think there is an ongoing trial in PGH. Pero kung naghahanap sila ng trials abroad, madami na at meron na pong meta-analysis. Ang problem po, meron declaration ng DOH accepting the systematic review. So magiging mahirap sa another agency in DOH na tanggapin yung evidence na yon. Kasi nagsabi na po yung DOH mismo na according to the systematic review, the ivermectin does not have sufficient evidence.
Actually, Mr. Chair, that goes back to my question. Sino bang nagde-decide kung anong titig ng foreign clinical trial? Is it the CPG? I don't know who's gonna answer this one. Maybe DOH can answer, any representative. Who decides kung paano po bang treatment natin sa clinical trials? Kasi yung mga EUA, lahat ng vaccines, walang local clinical trials yan eh. All based on foreign clinical trials, and yet everything is accessible here nandito sa ating bansa. So who decides anong foreign clinical trials ang titignan?
Let's recognize Dr. Melissa Guerrero of the Pharmaceutical Division of DOH.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question po. As explained now by Dr. Marisa Alejandria, ever since the start of the pandemic, we have been relying on the help of experts to help us sweep the evidence. So ideally po, nasi-sweep lahat talaga ng randomized controlled trials. Again, the Department of Health recognizes that the evidence is evolving. So ngayon, ang nakalagay po dun sa kanilang living CPG, insufficient evidence. It doesn't mean na wala talaga siyang evidence. It's just that now, insufficient evidence. But we welcome po ito po mga comments po ni Dr. Dalmasión, and we can submit the comments of Dr. Dalmasión on the review of the living CPG. We are now conducting a clinical trial locally together with the Department of Science and Technology po, again with UPPGH for mild to moderate COVID-19.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, nalala ko humingi si Dr. Guerrero ng copy ng presentation ni Dr. Iggy. Was this even considered at all nung sinabmit po sa inyo?
Dr. Melissa, please respond.
Sir, wala pa pong sinasubmit sa aming presentation. So you can submit that to us and then we can work that out with the living CPG kung ito po ay pwedeng i-consider dun sa kanilang review.
Who decides the membership of the living CPG?
Meron po kasing proseso yan, hindi lang po natapos kanina. So meron po silang COI management. I think they're working with other specialty societies and experts on evidence review. And then minsan po may mga DOH representatives po doon na umuupo din just so to make sure po na fit doon sa aming policy needs yung pong kanilang review.
Who decides nga, Mr. Chair? Who decides who
Meron pong
becomes a
steering-
member of the
Meron pong
CPG?
steering committee po. Merong steering committee po.
Who are the members of the steering committee, Mr. Chair?
Can I refer to the living CPG po?
Dr. Alejandria.
Hello, may we request member of the CBG, Dr.
Alejandria.
Alendria, to answer.
For the steering committee, we have members from the Philippine College of Physicians, Philippine College of Chest Physicians, Philippine Academy of Family Physicians, Philippine Medical Association, the Department of Health, Philippine College of Emergency Medicine. So it's actually 20 stakeholder groups that are involved. So 20 societies who are actively involved in the management of COVID-19. So representatives from each of these societies.
It was mentioned earlier that nag-declare kayo ng conflicts of interest individually. Pero paano yung associations? Kasi syempre as an association, katulad ng pinakita ni Kong Mike Defensor before, you're reliant also on certain pharmaceutical industries for sponsorships and all that. How do you manage that one?
The process is based on individual conflicts of interest. We assess because it's the individuals who participate in the consensus panel, in the voting, in the deliberation of the recommendations. It's the individuals. And these individuals are designated by their respective societies. So the evaluation of conflicts of interest is on an individual basis.
Ano pong magiging role ng PSMID ngayon? Paano ang setup nyo? PSMID and Living CPG? Is PSMID part already? Kasi dati PSMID lang eh. Tapos nung nag-complain kami, naging Living CPG na. So ano po ang involvement ng PSMID?
May I clarify? It was only during the first quarter of the pandemic that it was PSMID who volunteered because we are in the front lines. We needed to give immediate guidance to our practitioners. So during the first quarter, we came up with an interim guidance. And then succeedingly, but that interim guidance is not based solely on our infectious disease practitioners. We also consulted the pulmonologists, the internist in coming up with the guideline, the Infection Control Society. So it's not a unilateral decision by the society. So from the start, it has been always a collegial consultation among the societies who are managing COVID-19. And we have expanded this in the COVID Living CPG to include also other societies like Academy of Family Physicians, as we know more about the disease in that it involves different specialty societies. We have involved everyone already. So because the management is holistic.
Mr. Chair, since andito na si Dr. Alejandria, may I ask her in connection to the presentation of Dr. Dalmacion, hindi po ba natin i-consider yung mga meta-analysis? Bakit po yung systematic review pa rin po tayo nag-concentrate?
We actually updated our systematic review. The March data includes only 6, and then we updated that in April, and this May we also updated it. We have now 18 RCTs, and we can show you the meta-analysis that we have if you want.
May we hear from Dr. Dalmacion? Dr. Dalmacion.
Dr. Dalmacion.
Chair, what's the question?
Yung sinasabi po niya na
No, a recommendation was done from a systematic review. You don't make recommendation if you're saying there's insufficient evidence. Because at the time that the systematic review was released by PSMID, there was also existing meta-analysis about 2.
Dr. Alejandria, through you, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Alendria,
Yeah.
please respond.
We acknowledge that there are existing systematic reviews, and we have updated our evidence summaries. That is the concept of a living CPG. We update as the evidence evolves, and we have updated our evidence review such that now the recommendation is there is insufficient evidence to use ivermectin for mild to moderate COVID-19 except in the context of a clinical trial. And then we suggest against the use of ivermectin in severe and critical based on the review of the evidence. We have
Mr.
seen
Chair,
our
yeah.
meta-analysis.
So how do you decide kung ano pong titignan meta-analysis? Kasi may meta-analysis that's also saying ivermectin is safe to use, na pwede siyang gamitin for mild to moderate.
Maybe Dr. Dance, you would like to. Oh, okay. So how?
Can
What
I-
we okay.
Can I add? I'm asking permission to add.
Yes, you may proceed, Dr. Dance.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Dance from the Living CPG as well. There are several criteria before you actually we make a protocol per question. So we already have 120 recommendations from all the systematic reviews that we have done. Specifically for ivermectin, the comparison that were made by Dr. Dalmachon was already the previous systematic reviews and meta-analysis that we have done. Since this is a living CPG, we update this almost on every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. We update it as soon as the new randomized controlled trials are coming out. So yung comparison that was made was already an old basis for the recommendations. So we have new updates on this already. So with regards to the question, what criteria do we use to include or exclude certain studies? Very strict, ma'am, yun, no? So randomized controlled trials, depending on the research question per individual trials, those are the ones that has to be included. Some of those included in the previous meta-analysis, and we look at all the meta-analysis that has been published. What we saw were some of the studies that were included were just PowerPoint presentations. They're not really published nor preprints of these trials. So we appraise each of the individual studies that has to be included. We appraise the quality of evidence. We just don't include all available studies. So if they say they saw 200, they saw 300, we actually saw most of them, but all of them, but we had to choose based on that's how a scientific paper is actually, or a systematic review is done, is you have a very strict eligibility criteria, and those that will satisfy those criteria has to be included. Now, in situations where there are very few studies, sometimes we might have to lower the quality that is accepted, no? But we have to address the limitations found on those studies. But in this case, in ivermectin, we already have, as of our last systematic review and literature search, we already have included 18 randomized controlled trial. So hindi talaga wala, no? Meron talaga, ma'am. Kaya lang, unfortunately, most of these trials are already done in the early stages of the pandemic, and some of them were done in a rush and really was not very good clinical trials. In systematic reviews, one of the things that we have to make sure of, because this is like garbage in and garbage out, so you have to make sure that you only include quality studies so that your conclusions can also be good conclusions and not be biased, no? So ganun, ma'am, yung systematic review with regards assessment. So super, ano naman po, ma'am, yan, maraming supervision. It has gone through several evaluations from other methodologies as well. Yan.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
to follow up, dun po ba sa 18 na binase nyo, meron po ba dong in favor of ivermectin? Na may positive na dun sa 18 na tinignan ninyo?
Meron po. Meron po, Congressman. And actually, yung overall total niya is actually nasa positive side. Pero in the last few weeks, with the additional newer studies, with regards impact on mortality, parang mas lumalapit na siya doon sa results that says andito na yun, papakita ni Doktora. That says it's almost as good as placebo. But we're still waiting kasi there are around 40 randomized controlled trials ongoing and recruiting. So we're waiting for those results, including yung one that's going to be started here in the Philippines as well. So we're waiting for this kasi sino ba ma'am yung ayaw ng merong treatment sana tayo for COVID, no? Lalo na kung oral lang and then yun. Sige,
Sir
isa.
Chair, ma'am, correct me if I'm wrong, di ba parang sa remdesivir, ganun din naman yung ano natin, that insufficient evidence din po siya? Tama po ba? At saka hindi na po siya ina-allow ng WHO.
So ano, Isay, would you like to answer that or ako na?
Okay, sige. For remdesivir, first is remdesivir is for hospitalized patients. And there are 4 big RCTs that have been conducted. All the trials did not show benefit in terms of mortality, but there were trials that showed benefit in terms of clinical improvement. So it reduces hospital stay. So the recommendation actually for remdesivir is actually a conditional recommendation. It is not recommended for patients who do not require oxygen. It is also not recommended for patients who are already on mechanical ventilation. It is only recommended for a small subset of patients who are requiring low flow oxygen. So these are those who are on the severe but not critical phase. So that is only the subset of patients where it is suggested actually to be used. And the recommendation is just a suggestion, not a strong recommendation, because we are also waiting for the final results of the WHO Solidarity Trial, which has stopped its recruitment last January, and it is the biggest trial so far. So we are awaiting the results of that big trial, and then before we can make any conclusive recommendation as far as remdesivir is concerned.
So, Mr. Chair, doon nga ako nagtataka eh. Parang pareho siya ng level ng Ivermectin, pero sa Ivermectin, lahat man ng societies nagsabi, bawal yung reseta yan, bawal yung puro bawal. Pero sa remdesivir, sabi mo nga, hindi pa sigurado, conditional, tsaka ano, pero all hospitals are actually using it, and no society is talking or saying na caution on the use of remdesivir. I would like to know, ano po bang difference nung dalawa, na bakit sa Ivermectin, talagang gung-ho na lahat ng societies, bawal kayong magreseta niyan, bawal kayong gumamit niyan. Pero sa remdesivir na medyo marami na rin nagkakaroon ng evidence against it, wala pong nagsasalita. Bakit po ba ngayon? I would really like to understand, ma'am.
First is remdesivir, it has to be used in addition to dexamethasone. We're not saying that we use it alone. So in hospitalized, because it's steroids that has been shown to reduce mortality among patients requiring oxygen. So remdesivir, tocilizumab, these are recommended to be used in addition to steroids, not by itself. Okay, so that's for hospitalized patients. For ivermectin in mild to moderate, we are not saying that physicians should not. We did not say. What we said was there is insufficient evidence. When there is insufficient evidence, we call it clinical equipoise. Now we are not sure, there is much uncertainty. So you can prescribe, but you need to explain to the patient that there is still uncertainty as far as this, as far as ivermectin is concerned. That's very similar to how we started out with hydroxychloroquine in the initial months of the pandemic. It was also insufficient evidence. We had to explain to the patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yun nga po, kasi yung members ng living CPGs are also those societies that released those statements that you cannot prescribe or matatanggalan ka ng lisensya pag nag-prescribe ka ng ivermectin. I'm happy that you're stating now that doctors can prescribe it. Pero syempre, when all the societies na members din ng Living CPG release a statement, then it causes confusion to a lot. Sa study niyo po ba, ganun po ba kalala ang side effect ng ivermectin na kaya kailangan i-warning niyo lahat ng doktor na walang magreseta nito? I mean, you're also a member of those organizations that's part of PSMID. I would like to know, ano po bang nakita niyo na malalang side effect nito na talagang para siyang bawal na droga na bawal inumin ng mamamayang Pilipino?
Last 5 minutes. Please answer, Dr. Andrea.
The meta-analysis did not show significant difference in terms of the adverse events, but our dictum is first do no harm. So our caution only is because we are not sure of what is the right dose, what is the correct dose in using ivermectin for treatment and for prophylaxis, because the trials use varying doses. So we need to be careful when we prescribe what dose are we going to give.
Medyo malinaw-linaw po yun. Ma'am, can we just request na meron po ba kayong inassign na task force under the CPG to really look into this? Kung anong dosing, kung yun lang po palang issue natin, yung dosing, ang mga dapat gawin, then maybe the Living CPG can actually form a task force and concentrate on this. Because if there's really hope for this, then maganda po na magawa natin ng paraan sa sarili nating bansa.
Yeah, in our meta-analysis, we look at the doses also. And plus, we are about to start the clinical trial, looking at the high dose and low dose. So which one is the appropriate dose? Okay. So
Maraming salamat po for that. Mr. Chair, actually ang dami ko pang tatanungin pero hindi kasi regarding this one. I still have 5 minutes pero mamaya bago ko matapos si Dr. Rafi Castillo would like to answer, pero wag mo kunin sa time ko, Mr. Chair. Meron lang akong gustong i-take up kasi on patent issue because this is important. I don't know if kasama na natin ang IPO with us. Are they here? Wala pa yung IPO? Okay, siguro later na lang kasi meron mga patents na kailangan ma-release natin in the time of pandemic and I'd like IPO to talk about that. DOST, is DOST with us? Yan. Yes, siguro from DOST, pag may mga bagong inventions, can we support our scientists and doctors? Wala rin sa so patawag na lang natin even for later. So sige, so since wala naman yung ibang tatanungin ko, let us recognize Dr. Rafi Castillo, please.
Dr. Rafi Castillo, for your statement on the Living CBG.
Actually, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair and DS Herrera. Yes, I just like to point out, because I think we have a lot of real-world evidence, which are very pertinent, very relevant, and this seems to be ignored by our regulators, by our guideline drafters. Real-world evidence of ivermectin being distributed to populations and see remarkable reductions in the transmission of COVID and the prevention of death. In Uttar Pradesh, for example, in India, and I think we should look into that because I think it's a very good model for the Philippines. Uttar Pradesh is the most densely populated state in India with 230 million population, bigger than ours, more than twice as ours, and yet the transmission rate with the current surge in India, the transmission rate is 72% less, and their death rate is less than 62% compared to the rest of India, excluding Uttar Pradesh. And just over the weekend, the head of the government of Uttar Pradesh came out with a statement. They were sharing, and they were very confident in sharing that their main secret is the timely and early use of ivermectin since August of last year. So despite being the densely populated state, logically they should be one of the most severely affected states in India, but they're the ones doing very well compared to the other states of India. And we have a lot of similar other real-world evidence Chile, Mexico, Paraguay, Czech Republic, and several other countries. So I was just wondering why these data are not considered. Why these real-world data are not considered. And I believe these are even more pertinent, relevant data. You know, these are because this is where the rubber meets the roads. Sabi nga natin you only know a car is good when you test drive the car, when the rubber meets the road. Ito yung mga data where the rubber meets the road, real-world evidence. And I think our FDA will be more efficient in processing not only ivermectin but other product applications if they are more pragmatic and consider real-world evidence. We may look into the 21st Century Cures Act in the U.S., which are streamlining operations of the FDA and considering more real-world evidence rather than just randomized controlled clinical trials. So I think we should veer away already from randomized controlled trials and also consider real-world evidence. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Last question na lang ako kay Dr. Alejandria. Doc, at saka kay Dr. Dance or the whole Living CPG, paano po ba pwede maging membro nyo si Dr. Dalmacion? At yung I know, but I'm serious. Kasi sometimes, kailangan mas varied yung ating membership eh. Ma'am, can I request that you submit to us kung sino yung magko-compose kung sabi mo nga you'd form a team to seriously look into this? Because if like you said, there's no adverse effects in all the clinical trials that you have studied and that it's just the dosing na ang problema, then seriously, we have to create that task force as soon as possible. Can we count on you on the Living CPG to help us on that one? Kasi para once and for all, masettle natin. Kasi if it's something that can really cure us, then that's something that we really need at this point. Hindi naman po ito to compete with the vaccines that we have or kung ano mang meron, pero at least another option for the Filipino people.
Chair?
Yes, please proceed. Please answer.
Can Dr. Dance, Antonio Dance, one of our project advisors, answer that?
Yes, Dr. Dance.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm wondering if I can be heard.
Yes.
Yes, good afternoon. Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I'd like to start with my conflict of interest. I have no financial conflicts of interest with the use of ivermectin. In fact, I hope it eventually turns out in studies to be an effective drug. We really need something to be able to give our patients. I guess my only conflict of interest is Dr. Inday Dance is my household boss, and she leads the living guidelines. I'd like to say three things, ma'am. Number one is that when you talk of serious adverse effects, the serious adverse effects among patients given ivermectin is 5 times higher. These serious adverse effects are side effects that lead to cessation of the drug, a life-threatening condition. So it's 5 times more, but it is not statistically significant. And in our view, the most dangerous drug is a drug that has no effect. And that's why even if you give a very relatively safe drug, but it has no effect, its rare dangers can become significant. The second thing I want to say, and third thing, relate to what Dr. Dalmacion represented kanina, which is disagreement in meta-analysis. Yung meta-analysis lang naman po is a summary of the different trials that have been done on a particular drug. And there are 2 dangers na I think pwede hong maintindihan ng grupo dito. The first danger of a meta-analysis is called heterogeneity. Napakalaking danger. It's ethical, moral, statistical, and technical danger. Bakit ko po sinabi yan? Let's say a drug is tested in young people and it shows it kills young people in one trial. And then in another trial, it reduces the mortality of older people. So it saves the old and kills the young. But when you summarize, you will see that it has no effect. That is a very dangerous conclusion. To say that based on these two trials, this drug has no effect. Because it killed the young and helped the old survive, you should avoid it among the young and actually give it to the elderly. The conclusion na walang effect is dangerous. That's why we don't like to join trials na iba-iba ho yung tanong, iba-iba ho yung subject, iba-iba ho yung dose. Because, and the statistical tests that Dr. Dalmatian talked about, they are not reliable in detecting heterogeneity. The only way we can protect against heterogeneity is by closely analyzing the studies. And the example I gave you about killing the young and saving the old is actually not an imaginary example. It's a real example from a real drug. So one of the suggestions po that I'm giving and which will explain the differences in the different meta-analysis is address naman yung heterogeneity. Huwag yung magsasabay-sabay ng iba-ibang drug combination, ivermectin plus hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin plus this drug, yung iba compared to placebo, yung iba compared to other drugs. Those are frank heterogeneity and those are very dangerous combinations because pinagsasabay mo situations where they help and where they don't help. So that's one danger. The second and last danger I want to point out was already pointed out by Dr. Dance. It's the quality of evidence. Kung pangit ang, kahit na maganda yung effect, reduction in mortality, kung pangit ang evidence, then that's questionable evidence. And in fact, if you look at all the meta-analysis on ivermectin, whether done by the proponents or not, they all agree that there were less deaths on ivermectin. But they all agree that the evidence is poor. So anong gagawin natin if the evidence is poor? Diyan ho nagkakaiba ng decision kasi pareho rin hong resulta ng mga meta-analysis, less deaths on ivermectin, but the evidence is low, very low, or at best moderate. The only difference is that some people think with low quality evidence, you can already give it. And the other doctors, I would believe, most doctors believe, na kailangan better quality yung evidence before you finally give it. So may heterogeneity, kita yan ng lahat. Low quality evidence, nakita yan ng lahat. Ang nagkaiba lang ho sa value judgment.
Thank you po.
So, yun lang po. I hope that explains bakit iba-iba ho yung results. Pero pare-pareho naman ng findings, iba lang yung conclusion.
Thank you po.
Mr. Chair, since marami na tayong resource persons and I don't have time anymore, hahayaan ko na lang yung ibang representatives to call on the other resource persons to answer this. Pero Sir, sana last, andyan na yung IPO. Kung lang sa patent, they could quickly lang say kung ano yung kailangan nating palitan to lift the patent because it's very critical in this time of pandemic.
Any representative from the IPO?
I think George San Diego is there from IPO.
George San Diego? Andyan po. Ayan.
Andyan na po si George San Diego and then the next legislator na baka mapagalitan na ako. Thank you, Hong Mike. Thank you, Deputy Speaker Marcoleta. And thank you.
Ayun na po. Okay. Yes, no, there's only one question you need to answer from DS Herrera. DS Herrera, please proceed.
Yes, Mr. Santiago, no need for the presentation. Quickly lang, ano ang kailangan ba na ngayon na meron bang mga kailangan i-lift para, bakit importante na may mga patents tayong ma-lift during this pandemic?
I think, ang sitwasyon po kasi dati, nung pre-pandemic, yung mga patent holders masyadong mahigpit. Ngayon po, under yung mga rules, particularly Section 93, andun po lahat. And besides, nakalagay dun, only the Director General can issue licenses compulsory licenses. Yun ang importante po yung compulsory licenses. You can compel any patent holder na gamitin mo.
Please submit your position paper on how we can lift the patents on certain drugs in this pandemic. Next to interpolate, thank you. Thank you, DS Herrera. Next to interpolate is DS Marcoleta. You have the floor. You are recognized.
Maraming salamat po, Mr. Chair. Do I understand, Mr. Chair, that the representatives from the FDA, I think there are 2 undersecretaries and 4 others.
I'll give you 25 minutes, DS Marcoleta. Thank you.
Is it our impression that they are authorized to speak for the Director General on behalf of the FDA?
Director General Oscar Gutierrez, please answer. Deputy Director General Gutierrez.
Yes, sorry po, Honorable Chair. On behalf po of the FDA Director General, I have, as the OIC now of FDA, I can entertain questions for related to our topic. Salamat.
Mr. Deputy, on May 5, 2021, President Duterte asked Director Domingo if there is an iota of success up to now on Ivermectin. Ang sagot po niya ay hinihintay pa po niya ang 1 buwan o 2 buwan bago siya makakalap ng mga ebidensya para masagot ang tanong ng Pangulo. Alam po ba niyo yung tanong na yun, Director?
Opo, Congressman, alam ko po yun, napanood ko po yung segment na yun. Opo.
Ang tanong po ng Pangulo, if there is an iota of success. Alam po ba ninyo yung ibig sabihin ng iota?
Opo.
Kakarapot, katiting, gapurot. Tama po?
Tama po.
Bakit naghihintay pa siya ng 1 buwan o 2 buwan para makakalap pa ng ibang ebidensya? Ano po bang ebidensya ang hinahanap pa ninyo? Ang sabi niya, dahil sa inyong mga espesyalista, kailangan pa ng 1 o 2 buwan pa.
Meron po kasing mga ongoing clinical trial, yung randomized clinical trial, yung iba pa po ay double-blinded po na malapit na pong matapos. Yan nga po yung napag-usapan bago nyo po ako tanungin, nakikinig po ako, talaga pong malapit na rin po matapos nila yung mga trials na yon. Inaantay lang po ng FDA na magkaroon po ng conclusive findings po base po dun sa mga trial. At base po dun sa sagot po ni DG, meron pong clinical trial na ginagawa po locally. At within 5 months, pwede po tayo magkaroon na ng initial findings. Pero tatakbo po yun ng clinical trial mga 1 taon.
Director,
yun po, Congressman.
Napakahaba ng sagot ninyo. Tinatanong ko lamang, ang tanong ng Pangulo kung merong iota of evidence. Bakit hindi po nyo sinagot kung meron o wala? Kasi ang iota, katiting, karampot. Wala po kayong nakita kahit nakatiting o karampot na katibayan ng success ng Ivermectin nung panahon na itanong niya yon?
Nung nagkaroon po ng...
Tinatanong ko po kayo, wala kayong nakita kahit iota of evidence ng success ng Ivermectin?
Kasi po ang FDA po, wala po kasi...
Tinatanong ko po kayo kung wala kayong nakita ng iota of evidence.
Wala po kasi nakabase po tayo sa clinical findings po ng mga expert po.
Nino po?
WHO. Meron pong mga expert po na tumitingin sa mga randomized clinical trial.
Director,
opo.
Ito po ang katotohanan. Sa worldwide experts clinical trials, meron na pong 54 trials as we speak. 442 scientists, 17,600 patients. Ang tinatanong po ng Pangulo, if there was an iota of success. Ito pong mga ito na ginawa ng mga dalubhasa ng mga doktor sa iba't ibang bansa, 27 randomized controlled trials, 85% improvement in prophylaxis trials, 80% improvement in 20 early treatment trials, 47 improvement in 20 late treatment trials, 74% improvement in 20 mortality results, 66% improvement in 27 randomized controlled trials. Ito po ba ay hindi nyo kinikilala, Director?
Meron po yung mga grupo po na
Tinatanong ko po kayo, hindi nyo po kinikilala itong ebidensyang binanggit ko sa inyo?
meron pong tumitingin po niyan, Congressman.
Kayo
Yung
po,
mga,
minsan kayo ay opisyal ng FDA. Hindi po ba ito kinikilala ng FDA? Kasi ang tanong sa inyo ng Pangulo, if there is an iota of success, ang iota po kahit kakarampot, kahit gatiting. Ito pong binanggit ko sa inyo, buntun na po ito eh. Buntun na po ng ebidensya. Ang tanong ko sa inyo, hindi ba kinikilala na ebidensya ito ng FDA?
meron pong tumitingin niyan po sa UP. Ang iba po,
Tinatanong ko po ang FDA. Paiba-iba po kayo, kaya po tayo nagtatagal eh. I am asking you, in the name of FDA, does FDA officially recognize this or not?
Kung hindi po mag-a-apply po ng authorization
Ito
from
ang
FDA,
nagsasabi na hindi mag-a-apply. Ito po ay mga dalubhasang doktor sa iba't ibang bansa. Ibig po ba ninyong sabihin, meron pa po kayong kinikilala rito sa ating bansa na mas dalubhasa dito sa mga taong ito? Halimbawa, galing na ng Amerika ito eh. Israel, Belgium, Australia. Napakarami po nila eh. Ang tanong po ng Presidente, if there is an iota of evidence, hindi ninyo sinagot ang Pangulo. Bakit?
kasi nga po, ang FDA po ay, ang trabaho po ay mag-assess po ng mga applications regarding indications, kung ano po yung claim ng product.
Wala po kaming pakialam doon sa trabaho ninyo. Ang tinatanong ko po sa inyo, tinanong ang Director General ninyo ng Pangulo ng Pilipinas.
Opo.
Hindi ninyo sinagot ang totoo. Ang sabi niya, is there an iota of success? Huwag kayong lalayo doon para makatapos tayo. Kaya tinatanong ko sa inyo, bakit nagsinungaling? Nandito po, meron kayong professional dishonesty, concealment, if not deliberate deception. It is the President of the Philippines who asked the Director General if there was an iota of success. Wala kayong sinagot. Ang sinagot niya, maghihintay pa po ng 1 o 2 taon o dalawang linggo.
Opo.
Bakit po? Bakit hindi po niyo sinagot ng diretso?
Congressman, mawalang galang na po. Ang FDA po, ang mandato po niya ay siguraduhin po na yung mga produkto po, lalo na po mga gamot, ay safe, effective, and good quality. Dapat po may matibay po na basihan para po kilalanin natin ang
sabi sa inyo na hindi yan ang tanong ko. Ang dapat ay sinagot ninyo ang tanong ng Pangulo. Eh di dapat ganyan ang sinagot ni Director Domingo kung gaano mo sinasagot. Bakit hindi ganyan ang sinagot niya? Ang sabi ni Director Domingo, maghihintay pa ng 1 hanggang 2 taon.
Kasi
hanggang 2 buwan. Okay? Bakit? Pwede ba natin sabihin sa tao, maghintay ka muna, huwag ka munang mamatay?
Mawalang galang na po.
Yun.
Kasi po nung panahon na tinatanong po siya, meron pong direktiba ang Presidente ng Pilipinas na mag-conduct po ng clinical trial locally. So,
nandun na ako, Director eh. Paulit-ulit ka eh. Wala akong pakialam kung meron na tayong ginagawang clinical trial. Ang tinatanong ng Pangulo noong Mayo 2021, is there an iota of success up to now? Sabi niya. Binanggit ko sa iyo, itong mga ginawa ng mga dalubhasang mga doktor at mga scientists at eksperto sa iba't ibang bansa. Bakit hindi nyo sinabi sa kanya ng diretsyo sapagkat ang tinatanong niya, iota of success?
Opo, kaya nga po nag-conduct po ng local clinical trial kasi may iota po.
Sinagot na merong higit pa sa iota of success. Yun ang gusto kong sabihin sa inyo. Bakit hindi mo sinabi na tunilada na ebidensya meron na ginawa sa ibang bansa? Hindi nyo ba kayang aminin yun sa Pangulo?
Yung local clinical trial po, nakabase po yan sa findings po ng mga clinical trial na naganap na.
Director, ano ka ba?
Kulang po ang ebidensya. Evidence-based
Naiintindihan mo ba yung tinatanong ko? Naiintindihan mo ba? Walang sinasabi ang Pangulo na local trials. Ang sinasabi ng Pangulo kung meron sa ngayon, available, kahit anong parte ng daigdig. Kanina ka pa, hindi mo sinasagot ang tanong eh.
Meron pong
Bakit kayo
findings.
papalayo?
Meron pong ginawang pag-aaral po ang WHO na sinasabi niya po, kulang
Hindi
po
ko
ang
tinatanong ang WHO, ang tinatanong ko ang FDA director. Kaya nga tayo nagtatagal eh. Bakit hindi kayo sumabay? Halimbawa, Amerika, Australia, okay? Belgium, Israel, United Kingdom.
Wala.
Bakit hindi kayo sumabay?
Mawalang galang na po. Doon po sa mga bansa na nabanggit nyo, wala po akong napag-alaman na meron pong nagrehistro ng produkto ng Ivermectin para po sa COVID. Wala po tayong makikitang rehistro ng Ivermectin na ang indication niya ay para sa COVID.
Mr. Chair, pwede bang
Pero
ginamit
po siya sa
pwede
national.
ba pagsabihan natin ng ating resource person na kung ano yung tinatanong lang, doon lamang ang sagutin niya. Wala akong sinasabi sa gamot. Ang pinag-uusapan natin dito, clinical trials. 54 trials, 442 scientists, 17,600 patients.
Opo.
Hindi ba nyo kinikilala ito na ebidensya? Ang tinatanong po ng Pangulo, iota of evidence. Hanggang ngayon ba hindi mo naiintindihan ang tanong?
Naiintindihan ko po, Congressman.
You have 10 minutes, DS.
Isang
Congressman, mawalang galang na po.
Ganito eh, ayaw nang sagutin eh.
Hindi, mawalang galang na po. Ang mandatum po kasi ng FDA ay siguraduhin po lahat po ng gamot na nasa market o gagamitin po ng gobyerno ay safe, effective, and quality po. At ito po ay nakabase sa scientific evidence po. Yung pinag-uusapan po kanina, yung evidence-based medicine po at nakasalalay po siya sa sa mga clinical trial po na dapat po ay properly done, properly designed, at isa pong random clinical trial po. Usually po, double blind po yan. So, delikado po kasi na ang FDA basta na lang mag-a-approve ng produkto kasi meron pong mga tao na sensitibo, yung mga buntis po, mga bata, at yung mga yung may comorbidities din. So lahat po yan, makakapture po yung clinical trial.
Nauubos lang ang panahon ko sa iyo, Director eh. Nauubos lang ang tanong ko sa iyo eh. Ang tanong ko lang ang intindihin mo. Meron nang gumawa ng clinical trials na nagpatunay na mayroong bisa, may benepisyong Ivermectin. Tinanong ng Pangulo kung meron kayong alam na iota of evidence ng success. Yun lang ang tanong. Hanggang ngayon hindi mo masagot-sagot. Ang tinatanong ko sa iyo, bakit hindi nyo sinabi sa Pangulo na meron po, marami pong trials na po ang ginawa sa iba't ibang bansa katulad ng Amerika, ng Australia, ng Belgium, ng UK, at ng Israel, Argentina, napakarami. Bakit hindi ganun ang sinagot ninyo? Bakit ang sinasabi mo maghihintay pa kayo? Kaya nga tanong ko sa inyo, hindi nyo ba kinikilala itong ginawa ng mga dalubhasang doktor na ito na ebidensya rin para sana nasagot ninyo ng tama ang Pangulo ng Pilipinas? Naiintindihan mo ba yung tanong ko?
Naiintindihan ko po.
Bakit hindi nyo sinabi sa Pangulo na merong higit sa iota of evidence, tunilada ng evidence, meron? Ba't hindi ganun ang sinagot nyo?
Mawalang galang na po. Congressman, meron
po. Bakit hindi ganun ang sinagot mo kung naiintindihan mo ang tanong?
Ito na po. Yung pong iota of evidence, ang sinasabi po doon sa pumasa sa screening ay kulang pa po ang ebidensya. Kaya nga po.
Sino ba ang gumagawa sa inyo sa lokal natin? Sino ba yung sinasabi ni Director Domingo na eksperto? Sabihin mo sa akin, sino ang eksperto nating lokal na nakagawa na ng isang clinical trial kagaya ng ginawa sa iba't ibang bansa? Sino na ang nakagawa?
Marami po. Nasa PCR.
Sino nga? Bigyan mo ako ng pangalan na nakagawa na ng clinical trial na sinasabi na ang Ivermectin ay walang bisa. Sino sa inyo?
Dito po sa
Sino?
Pilipinas, wala po akong alam na
O yun
local
ang
clinical
sinasabi ko sa
trial na
inyo eh.
ginawa po.
Wala kang ang alam eh. Wala kang alam na mayroong nakagawa na walang bisa ang ivermectin, pero ayaw mong kilalanin yung mga taong dalubhasa na nagsasabi, tunit-tuniladang patotoo na mayroong bisa ang ivermectin.
Kasi nga, mawalang galang na po.
Teka muna, wala na yan. Ang sinasabi ko nga sa'yo, ni isa, wala kang masabi na local expert natin na nakagawa ng clinical trial na walang bisa ang ivermectin. Kasasabi mo lang. Ano ngayon, ayaw mong paniwalaan? Anong inihintay mo? Ba't ayaw mong paniwalaan itong mga ebidensyang sinasabi ng mga tao?
Mawalang galang na po. Yung mga clinical trial po sa Pilipinas, dumadaan po sa FDA yung protocol for approval at
Kaya
yung
nga,
investigatory drug purpose. Wala pa pong
kung wala ngang lokal na nakagawa niyan, walang dadaan sa inyo kahit maghintay ka pa na 1,000 taon. Hindi ba? Wala ngang clinical trial na lokal eh.
Meron pong magaganap itong katapusan ng buwan po.
Congressman Joseph, Director, hindi natin masasabi sa mga pasyente na wag muna silang mamatay. Maghintay kayo ng 6 hanggang 8 buwan na sinabi ng director namin kay Pangulong Duterte, may gagawin kaming trial. Yun ba isasagot mo sa taong bayan? Alam mo ba kung ilan ang patay sa araw na ito, Director? Alam mo ba?
Mga 6,000 po. Pero mawalang
napatay ngayon, sa ngayon.
Napatay po, mga less than 100 naman po.
Anong less than 100? Mula nung magka-COVID hanggang ngayon, alam mo na kung ang bilang ng namatay?
Ay, mahigit 10,000 na po.
19,191. Alam mo, 19,191. Anong ibig sabihin nito, Director? Tanungin kita. Hindi mo alam? Ang ibig sabihin nito, habang kayo nagpapatumpik-tumpik, habang hindi kayo makagawa ng desisyon, habang nag-aatubili ka, patuloy na mamamatay ang maraming Pilipino. Ang sinasabi ni Director Domingo, maghihintay pa po tayo ng 6 hanggang 8 buwan. Ito ang sagot ninyo? Kanina sinabi mo wala ni isang clinical trial na nagawa dito sa bansang ito. Walang eksperto, sinabi mo, na nakagawa ng clinical trial at kayo ngayon ay naghihintay pa sa WHO sapagkat yun ang inihintay ninyo. Pero ang itinapat ninyo, Mr. Chair, ang itinapat po nila ay yung tinatawag na wala silang masabi laban sa 1 toneladang sinasabi nating patotoo sa mabisang epekto ng Ivermectin. Ang kanilang ginamit, Mr. Chair, ay yung statement na pinalabas ng Philippine COVID-19 Living Clinical Practice Guidelines ng UP, NIH, IC, etc., etc. Ang pinagbasihan po nila, Mr. Chair, kanina diniscuss ni Dr. Dalmacion, 6 na randomized control trials na di umano ay of good methodological quality. Tama po ba yun, Director? Ang pinagbasihan ninyo yung 6 na randomized control trials? Tama po?
Yung nakikinig po ako kasi po sa
evidence. Tama po.
Yun pong naintindihan ko po.
At
mawalang
daw, Director. Pagka nagtatanong ako, tumigil ka muna. Yung 6 na yun ay pinili ninyo of good methodological quality. At nagpatunay daw ng Ivermectin ay walang significant na contribution laban sa COVID-19. Hindi ba? Ito yung statement na ginawa ng UP, NIH, Philippine COVID-19 Living Clinical Practice Guidelines.
Meron.
Ngayon, nasabi na ni Dr. Dalmacion kanina, napakaraming malinon. Halimbawa, tingnan mo na lamang yung sinabi ni Dr. Dalmacion kanina, Director, isa sa pinagbatayan ninyo sa 6 na studies na ito, yung effect of Ivermectin on time to resolution of symptoms, Eduardo Lopez Medina.
kahit na ako hindi doktor, director, kapag binasa mo, ikaw kaya mong basahin ito, yung limitations ng study na ito, anong sinasabi? Babasahin ko sa'yo. This study has several limitations, sabi niya. First, the study was not conducted on completed according to the original design.
Nawala.
Hello, Kong Marcoleta, you're on mute. Hello, Kong Marcoleta.
Hello, narinig na po.
Hindi, kanina hindi ka narinig. Mga 2 minutes.
Yung pong pinagbasihan nila, isa sa mga 6 na randomized clinical trial daw po, itong Eduardo Lopez Medina na binanggit na po ni Dr. Dalmacion kanina, napakalaki po ng limitasyon. Unang-una, the study, nakalagay po sa mismong limitation nila, the study was not conducted or completed according to the original design. Isipin po ninyo yan. Common sense lang ito, Director. Sabi pa niya, and the original primary outcome to detect the ability of ivermectin to prevent clinical deterioration was changed 6 weeks into the trial. May tampering pa eh. In the study population, the incidence of clinical determination or deterioration was below 3%, making the original plant analysis useless. Ito yung mga pinagbasihan ninyo. Pagkatapos sasabihin mo sa amin ngayon na napakarami ninyong pinagbasihan. Sa totoo lang, alam mo, doon sa sinasabi ninyo na 6 na pinagbasihan ninyo, nasabi ninyo ay good clinical methodological quality, ang sabi pa ninyo doon ay systematic review. Binigyan pa nga kayo ng bonus ni Director ni Dr. Dalmacion. Hindi po systematic review ang ginawa nitong 6 na ito. Marunong din po tayong mag-analyze. Alam mo, Director, hindi ko nasasabi sa iyo, ako nakumpleto ko yung aking doctoral degree sa UP. Kaya alam ko ang distinction ng systematic review at saka literature review. Ang ginawa lamang po ninyo dito sa 6, literature review, hindi systematic review. Tandaan po ninyo yan. Ngayon, kung wala naman po kayong doktor pala, kasi po, Director, napansin mo ba itong COVID-19 living clinical practice na kung saan ay wala raw kakwenta-kwenta ang ivermectin? Ito ay kinapalooban ng 12 organisasyon, di ba? Meron, kasi binilang ko yung mga logos ninyo. 12 yun. Tama po ba?
Tama po yun.
Sino-sino ba sa mga doktor? Ito ang tanong, Director. Sino-sino po ba sa mga doktor na kasapi sa 12 organisasyon ito na bumuo ng statement na yon ang nakapagsagawa na ng clinical trial?
Wala pa akong datos ngayon, Congressman.
O wala?
Pero ang pwede ko po sabihin...
Sandali lang. Pag sinabi mong wala talaga, wala ka nang ikakatwiran doon. Ang lakas ng loob ninyo na gagawa ng isang statement, 12 organisasyon, ni isa, katulad ng sinabi mo, ni isa, wala man lang nagawa na isang clinical trial. Anong katwiran nyo para sabihin ninyo ng ivermectin ay walang bisa? O ito pa, yung consensus panel ng representatives na nakalagay doon na nag-issue ng statement, sila ba ay technically o medically equipped para i-assail yung
1 minute. We need to we have a second round.
Are they technically and medically equipped to assail the 54 trials conducted by 442 scientists all over the world?
Yes po. They are the best doctors and physicians that we have in the country po.
Hindi ko sila minamaliit, Director. Pero ang sinasabi ko sa iyo, 54 clinical trials conducted in America, in Belgium, in UK, in Israel, in Australia. Ibig kong sabihin, mas marunong ito para i-assail yung 54 trials na sinasabi ang Ivermectin ay mabisa? Are they competent to assail? Yun ang tanong ko sa iyo, baka hindi mo naintindihan.
Congressman, meron pong paraan para itong maraming
Ang tinatanong
studies.
ko sa iyo, hindi paraan. Ang tinatanong ko sa iyo, are they competent to assail?
Opo, they are competent po.
Mas magaling sila, mas talubhasa sila sa mga eksperto ng ibang bansa na mas mataas ang kanilang level ng technology, mas malawak ang kanilang mga karanasan at ang kanilang mga pasilidad ay mas marami. Mas competent ang local doctors natin.
Opo, ang pool of experts po ng FDA nanggagaling po sa kanila. Ang kalidad po ng decision ng FDA nakasalalay po sa kalidad ng kanilang evaluation din po.
Paano mo
Lalo
nalaman?
na po itong clinical trials.
Paano mo nalaman na mas competent ang ating local doctors sa mga foreign doctors na nagsigawa ng clinical trials, 54 trials, 442 scientists? Paano mo sasabihin na ganun-ganun na lamang, parang napakasimple sa'yo, na sasabihin mo na mas dalubhasa ang mga doktor natin? Paano mo nakuha yung konklusyon na yon?
Kasi po, well-regulated po ang ating medicine. May board of pharmacy.
Wala kung well-regulated ang ating mga... Tinatanong ko sa iyo, saan mo nakuha yung konklusyon na mas marunong ka sa atin? Hindi ko minamaliit ang ating mga local doctor. Sana nga, totoo ang sinasabi mo. Pero ang tanong ko sa iyo, anong basihan ng konklusyon mo?
Hindi po ang basihan ng conclusion.
Ano nga sabi mo kanina, they are technically and medically equipped to assail the mountain and tons of evidence.
Tama po yun.
Ano ang basihan mo nga?
Yung sinabi ko po kanina,
ano yung sinabi mo?
They are a well-regulated profession po under the Board of Medicine po ng PRC.
Lahat naman regulated ang profession. Tinatanong ko sa iyo, ano ang...
DS Marcoleta, you have exceeded the time allotted for the first round.
Ay sana po kung ang mga sumasagot hindi kagaya nitong director na ito, mapapadali po sana ako, Mr. Chair. Pero kamukha nitong huling tanong ko, tinatanong ko siya kung anong basihan niya, paano niya nasabi.
Siguro bigyan natin ng konting time pag sa second round makaisip na siya.
Sige, isipin mong mabuti, iwanan muna kita. Salamat, Mr. Chair.
Maraming po salamat, Congressman.
We will come back to you again, DS. Kong Mike Defensor for your first round, 20 minutes.
Mr. Chair, bago lang recognize si Kong Mike, I'd just like to put on record na nagre-request po si Dr. Alan Landrito and Dr. Iggy Agbayani to do a very, very quick presentation. Pero kahit mamaya na po after
the first round of interpolations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Kong Mike.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I may quick lang tong share screen ko. Una po, tatanungin ko po yung DOH. Kung meron po ba ang sasagot, Mr. Chair, because from the messages, parang wala si Yusek Guerrero.
Wala nang tiga DOH dito.
Nako.
Umalis na daw.
Okay, Mr. Chair, just to start the discussion, no. Sinabi kanina ni Professor Dance na yun daw hong fear niya, yung mga doktor daw ho ay yung absence of or evidence of efficacy mas delikado. Pero in a survey conducted in the Philippine American Association of Scientists and Engineers, yung 553 doctors na nagkaroon ng survey, ang sinabi po ng mga doktor, majority, they want and they're willing to have it tested for preventive and curative. Mula po sa pag-prevent, nanalo po majority na boto ng mga doktor at nanalo rin po yung sinasabing gamitin sa cure. So galing na po sa mga doktor yan. Wala na po tayong debate tungkol dito dahil survey po na ginawa yan. Ito po, Mr. Chair, ang sitwasyon natin ngayon, okay, sinabi nila, binigyan na namin ng Lloyd's Laboratory, pinapayagan na namin yung mga compounding, prescription ng doktor. And yet, ang mga doktor po natin, nakalagay po dito, isinabmit ng Department of Health ang pangalan nila sa Professional Regulation Commission. So, if I may know, wala po ba ang DOH? Kung wala po, from the FDA, Mr. Gutierrez, kayo po ba kasama dito sa submission sa PRC na tanggalan ng lisensya mga doktor?
Personally po, wala pa akong information regarding this po.
And institutionally, FDA is not part of this?
Tama po yun.
So hindi po kayo nag-submit sa PRC na tanggalan ng lisensya ang mga doktor?
Wala po akong alam tungkol sa listahan na nag-submit ng FDA po sa PRC.
No,
Wala
let's
wala
be
pong information. Wala pong ganyang ginawa ang FDA
okay, so walang ginawa. Period.
na nag-submit po.
Wala po period. So for the record do, kasi under oath naman tayo. Then I will ask now yung ating pong PMA. Nakita ko po nandyan yung ating mga PMA. Andyan po ba? From the Philippine Medical Association. Attorney Olarte ata nakita ko.
Attorney Leo Olarte, please respond.
From the Philippine Medical Association.
Dr. Benito Atienza.
Yes, sir. Present, Dr. Olarte po.
Okay, Dr. Olarte. Tanong ko lang po, nakalagay po sa inyo na hindi pwedeng mag-issue ng prescription ang mga doktor. At kailangan lang gamitin to sa mga ospital.
Opo, basta hindi po rehistrado ang gamot, hindi po kami nag-advise sa aming mga membro na mag-prescribe po ng gamot o mag-distribute. We are not after here whether the drug is nakakaigi o hindi nakakaigi. Ang amin lang po dito na yung gamot ay rehistrado. Kung rehistrado po yan, the PMA will advise distribution and prescription by the doctors. Pero kung hindi po rehistrado ang gamot para sa COVID-19, hindi po kami magbigay ng abiso.
For the record, Dr. Olarte, para lang humalinaw, inaprubahan na ng FDA ang Lloyd's Laboratory and they are here with us. So ang ibig niyo pong sabihin, dahil ang nematode ng approval niya, ay hindi niyo papayagan ang mga doktor ninyo mag-prescribe off-label.
Hindi po kami nag-a-advise mag-prescribe off-label. No, that is not beneficial.
No. Let's be clarified. Let's be clear. Kasi ang batas po natin allows off-label. Ang US sa Estados Unidos po pinapayagan off-label. So dito po sa atin, off-label is allowed. Legal po yan.
Hindi po legal yung off-label. Halimbawa, ang gamot is registered for parasites. That is
clarify po natin
label po. Yes po, abogado
Dr.
po
Olarte,
ako. Kaya...
i-clarify po natin ang sinasabi nyo, illegal ang off-label?
Yes po. Kasi po, pag ang gamot, halimbawa, Ivermectin, is registered for parasites. Yun po ang label niya. Ngayon, pag sinabi mo pong off-label, teka lang po, no? Pag sinabi po ninyong off-label, ibibigay mo po yung Ivermectin for another disease that is not indicated. So that is off-label po. Kaya po, hindi po magaling yan para sa pasyente.
Ang tanong po, Dr. Olarte, is yung legal o illegal eh. Sabi niyo po, illegal.
Illegal po, sa akin po. Aking opinion po, illegal po yun.
So pag hindi po registered at nirekomenda ng doktor, ayan po ay dapat kasuhan.
Siyempre po, pagka hindi po siya sumunod sa labeling ng gamot po, katulad po ng Ivermectin, which is labeled for parasites. And then, ibibigay mo po off-label for COVID. Hindi po siya rehistrado for COVID specifically, no? So pag nag-prescribe po ang mga doktor ng unregistered drug for a specific disease or illness, hindi po magbibigay ng konforma ang PMA niyan po.
Okay, so mas masama po talaga pag hindi registered. Kasi ang off-label registered pero piniscribe. Lalong masama po pagka hindi ni-register talaga.
Ano po?
Hindi po registered yung gamot tapos nagkaroon pa at ginamit, lalo hong masama.
Opo, hindi po registered for COVID po, masama po yan.
Kasi yung totally
registered po.
Yung totally hindi registered, mas masama pa ho pa. Di ba ho?
Yung hindi registered?
Opo.
Ivermectin is not registered for COVID.
No. Doc, let me clarify. Yung Ivermectin kasi o nematode, so registered na siya pero pag off-label sabi nyo hindi pwede. Sabi ko nga po, mas masama pa talaga pag lalo pang walang gamot na registered, hindi pa na inaprubahan. Tapos ginamit, mas masama pa ho yun at binigay ng doktor.
Yes po, basta hindi registered po for a specific illness, hindi po namin nire-recommenda na i-prescribe po ng mga doktor.
At illegal
Ganun
po.
po ang PMA.
At illegal po.
Ano po?
Illegal po, Doc.
Illegal po basta hindi rehistrado for a specific illness or disease.
Eto po kaya, Doc, anong tingin nyo dito? Hindi po registered kasi yung Sinopharm eh.
Meron pong merong compassionate use po. So meron po kasing mga exceptions, no? May compassionate use permit 'yan. So
Opo, alam niyo po ba, Doc, ang definition ng compassionate use? Alam po natin yung definition ng compassionate use?
Opo.
Alam niyo po?
Yes po. Exemption po 'yan sa registration dito sa ating gamot.
Yan po ang definition ng compassionate use. Based on ang tawag po dyan, expanded US access US FDA. Ang ibig pong sabihin, ang pasyente may threatening condition. Number 2, there is no comparable alternative. Ang patient is under clinical trial. Tapos yung potential risk na iimbestigahan. So hindi po ba babalik ako ha? Ito po. Bakit hindi niyo po sinasabing illegal yan?
Mayroon po siyang exemption.
Wala po,
siya doon sa
compassionate
registration.
Basahin niyo po yung compassionate special permit ng DOH.
Yes po.
Opo. Ang nakalagay po doon, pagka po talagang dying na yung patient, delikado na, the doctors and the hospital institutions allow compassionate special permit. Meron po tayong mga ibang vaccine na may FDA under emergency use authorization. Dapat po kasuhan din niyo po yung nag-injection niyan, di po ba?
Yes po, kung wala sa exemption po, but ang pagkaalam ko po yung Sinopharm na injected po sa ating Pangulo was given a compassionate use permit.
Oo nga po, pero
Yan
emergency
ang
use authorization
po.
po dapat dyan, Doc. Kasi hindi naman dying si Presidente eh. Di ba dapat alam niyo po yan as a PMA, legal advisor? And
Yes
dapat
po.
it is not a compassionate special permit because all vaccines are under emergency use authorization.
Opo.
Tama po.
Alam niyo po, it is not for PMA to question na binigyan po ng FDA yung compassionate use permit. Pag binigyan po, we accept that as a performance of regularity po, no? Because this is a government agency. Hindi po namin question yan. Binigyan po yan ng
Hindi, I'm just looking at your consistency, Doc, kasi 'di ba dapat sinabi nyo ang lahat po ba ng vaccines EUA? Opo, lahat po. Ako na po magsasabi sa inyo. Mr. Gutierrez, tama po ba lahat ng vaccines EUA?
Sa ngayon po, para po ma-approve ma-authorize ng FDA.
Ang tanong lang ho, di ba ang classification of vaccines, emergency use authorization, tama po?
Yun. EUA lang po sa ngayon ang paraan ng pagkuha po ng authorization, pero meron po tayong compassionate special permit.
Teka, hinto muna tayo doon. Kung magmula kay Pfizer, ang in-approve nyo na po, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Sinovac, meron na po kayo recently, may dalawa pa ho. Lahat po yan under emergency use authorization. Tama po?
Tama po yun. Meron pong isang distributor.
Isang term lang ho. Emergency use authorization lahat.
Meron po nag-apply niya ng EUA.
Can you define to me the compassionate special permit or expanded access?
Ay wala po tayong expanded access po sa USFDA po.
Compassionate special permit. Kasi pareho po yung Doc, Mr. Gutierrez. Ang expanded special permit, kung titingnan nyo po ang definition nila, is the same as a compassionate use.
Hindi naman po. Papaliwanag ko po ng konti.
Sige po.
Yung compassionate special permit po, kapag ang produkto na kailangan ng isang doktor o institusyon ay hindi po rehistrado sa Pilipinas. Pero kailangan po itong gamot na ito para gamutin o o i-mitigate po ang disease, i-prevent ang disease ng isang institution, doktor. Yun naman po
Life-threatening or serious condition. Kasi may protocol kayo. Pagka hindi na po pwede yung protocol, then you allow us compassionate special permit. Tama po?
Ang importante po, hindi po siya rehistrado pero kailangan po siya ng pasyente. Ito na pong EUA, kailangan po ito makakuha ng authorization sa FDA para magamit po ng general population. Hindi rin po siya registered pero ang intention po natin ay gamitin siya for the general population.
Iba, i-clarify niyo po, Mr. Gutierrez, i-clarify mo muna yung compassionate kasi nasa,
ito na nga po.
meron kayo ano dyan eh. Di po ba si Secretary Fabier nag-issue niyan dati nung sa emergency use authorization at saka compassionate? 1992.
Yeah.
Oh. So ito po, pag life-threatening or serious condition ang compassionate special permit.
Opo, in-update na po natin yan. May bago pong issuance noong 2019. Ang sinasabi po doon, yung isang doktor o espesyalista o institution, pwede po magpasok niyan sa Pilipinas, pero hindi po siya authorization for general use. For specific patients lang po. Hindi po siya para sa general population. Yung po ang kaibahan.
Kaya nga po. So ang sinasabi po natin, kasi maganda naman yung posisyon niyo, sabi niyo hindi kayo nagkasya sa FDA. Ang sinasabi ni Attorney Dr. Ollarte, kailangan daw Olarte. Ang sinasabi po niya, dapat kasuhan yung mga nagkaroon ng prescription, di ba ho, ng Ivermectin outside of the CSP. Ngayon, pinakita ko naman tong yung kay Sinopharm na hindi registered, hindi naman daw dapat kasuhan. Bakit wala akong consistency?
May consistency po yan, sir. Kasi ang sinasabi ko po, mayroong exception. May exception po to the unregistered Ivermectin. Ang exception
Mike, we have 8 minutes.
Or the emergency use authorization.
Okay,
Yun po ang exception.
Huli na lang po para makita po ninyo to ha. Para
wala naman po kaming naibigay na statement yata na tatanggalan. Wala naman po kaming naibigay na statement yata na tatanggalan po natin or bawal mag-prescribe. Ang position lang po ng Department of Health, because we have done this living CPG evaluation with the other experts, and that's why we have adopted that recommendation. And the position of DOH would be, we are open to further study so that we can see the evidence that it really would be providing benefit for our population.
Yung unregistered, pwede po yung mag-compounding. So yung pong pharmacy, kukuha lang po siya ng ardent activity po yun sa license na yung compounding, and they just have to follow regulations to make sure yung quality po ng kanilang produkto ay acceptable for humans.
So therefore, DGM Dr. Domingo, yung sinasabi ni Yusef Bergere, para ako nagkaroon ng pwede mag-prescribe ang doktor at pwede kunin sa isang compounding laboratory.
Basta po, ang palagay ko lang po kasi yung data, yung po siguro sa amin ng DOH noon, is kasi nga po yung panghayop po siguro yung naisip na hindi pwedeng ireseta sa tao. Pero kung compounding po, pwede po. So, ng FDA, ang doktor ay may karapatan mag-reseta. Kahit naman po off-label use or although we encourage it, it is not illegal. So never naman po nagsabi ng FDA na makukulit.
Ayan po, napakalinaw ng mga sinabi ng mga otoridad. Babalik po ako sa PMA, pati po yung PCP, kasi kasama po dyan ang PSMID. Sinasabi nyo po, ang DOH po kasi wala dito. Pero ang DOH pinapatanggalan ng lisensya yung mga doktor na nag-prescribe ng Ivermectin. Nag-survey po ang mga doktor, panalo pa rin na gamitin for preventive at cure ang Ivermectin. Kung titingnan nyo po ang nangyari, ang Department of Health, ginigipit ang mga doktor, kinausap ang PMA, kinausap ang PCP, na para bang kahit na ay napurbahan ang Ivermectin sa merkado, pinayagan na mag-register, wala na pong magpre-prescribe. That is how they are treating Ivermectin. Nung una hindi na maawat yung produkto, umiikot, ngayon they're saying kahit na nasa mercury drug na yan, Kung wala mag-prescribe, sino makakagamit ng Ivermectin? So Dr. Larte, for the record, because you're under oath, is that your position? You've heard the DOH. Narinig niyo po ang FDA. Naririnig niyo kayo ng FDA. Pwede mag-prescribe under a compounding laboratory. Kayo po nagsasabi pa rin, hindi pwede.
Under a compounding laboratory po, ang ibig mong sabihin na because it is compounded by a laboratory, even if it is not registered, pwede po mag-prescribe ang mga doktor. Yun po pa ang inyong ibig sabihin?
Pareho. Kasi may registration na tayo. Lloyd's Laboratories already registered. So you can already prescribe that off-label. Under a compounding, sinabi na ng DOH, FDA, pwede. Kayo na lang ho nagsasabing hindi. Ginigipit nyo yung sarili nyo mga doktor.
Hindi po namin ginigipit ang doktor. Sa amin po, no, we are very liberal in the interpretation of the law. Ang amin lang po, gusto lang po namin yung mga doktor namin ay nasa legal and they're in the safe on a safe practice of medicine, ethical practice. No? Kung hindi po rehistrado ang gamot, hindi po kami mag-a-advise na i-prescribe po yan. Now,
Doktor, iniba niyo po yung kwento eh. Meron na registered. Meron pang compounding. So they are allowed to prescribe therefore.
No po, yung compounding and registered are different. A laboratory
I'm giving an example. Merong compounding, meron po mga registered. Sa registered, they can do off-label. Sa compounding, they can do a prescription.
Yung compounded drug by a laboratory that has been given permit to compound does not mean to say that the compounded drug is registered for COVID and that the doctors can safely
do not mix the issue. The first issue is if it's a registered drug and they prescribe off-label, is it legal or not?
It is illegal po. Sa aking opinion, that is illegal po.
FDA, if it is a compounded drug and it is prescribed by a doctor off-label, is it illegal or not?
Malinaw naman po yung sinabi ni DG na pag nag-prescribe po ang doktor na off-label, siyempre po maghahanap po ng authorized drug sa market. Meron po ang mga compounded pharmacy na pwede silang mag-compound.
So is it legal or not?
Legal po yun kung
Thank you. Thank you.
galing po sa legal na paraan.
Thank you.
Authorized po.
My next question, FDA. If it is a registered drug, nag-prescribe ang doktor, is it legal or not? Off-label.
Opo, off-label po.
Oh.
Pagdating po sa off-label, meron po kasi diyang
hindi, wag na tayo mag-ano dun sa qualification ng medical. Legal ba yun o hindi?
Pag pinescribe po ng doktor ng off-label, pag sinerve sa, kunyari sabi niyo na po, nandun na sa Mercury yung gamot, registered na po. Madi-dispense po yun kung meron pong prescription.
So is it legal or not?
Kasi po nga, yung practice of medicine, under po yan ng Board of Pharmacy.
No. Do not. Registered drug. Ginawa niyang off-label. Is it legal or not? Okay.
Sir,
Wag tayo pumasok sa Ivermectin ha.
Sandali lang po.
Sa pediatric drugs. Ang 20% dyan off-label. Now, is it legal or not? Yun lang naman tanong. Kasi ang natin yung stand dati, kasi hindi registered, illegal. So pag compounding, legal. So ngayon, off-label, is it legal or not? Under the law.
2 minutes.
Legal po siya.
Okay, legal. Okay. No, Dr. Late, hindi na kita tatanungin kasi mas malala pa yung posisyon nyo sa DOH. Mas malala pa yung posisyon nyo sa FDA. So what I'm saying here is, nagkaroon na po, nagsalita na po ang mga doktor, 553 of your doctors, nagkaroon na ng survey. Your doctors are saying, allow it to happen. Your doctors, nung nagkaroon po sila sa PAASE na survey, they're already saying, payagan na to. Ngayon, ginigipit nyo yung mga doktor, ayaw nyo mag-prescribe. Kaya po, malaman to ng sambayan ng Pilipino. Kunyari, pinapakita, registered, kunyari ganito, pero ginigipit ng PMA, ng PCP, sa DOH, ang mga doktor. May kaso po ngayon yan. No less than the Department of Health called the Philippine Regulatory Commission para tanggalan ng lisensya yung 4 na doktor. The 4 doctors who were na minensyon ng presidente willing to put their heads no, to the chopping board para ipakita ang katama ng Ivermectin. Yan po yung binabanggit ni Presidente Duterte. So thank you,
Excuse
Mr.
me
Chairman.
po,
Maraming salamat
Mr.
po.
Congressman.
No,
Mr.
Dr.
Congressman.
Olarte, hindi mo sinasagot. Yung talo ka pa ng DOH FDA. Parang mas malala pa yung policy mo eh.
Hindi po, no? Ang
Kaya,
sinasabi
no, I just want to make it clear.
initiative-
Dr. Olarte, kasi for the record po tayo. FDA already said for the record, pagka-compounding, it is legal. FDA already said on the record, pagka-registered off-label, it is legal. Quoted po yung mga video ng DOH at FDA. Pinakita ko na po kanina kung di nyo napakinggan. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, thank you. Next to interpolate is the Honorable Hila Costa Jr. of the 3rd District of Palawan.
Thank
You
you,
have the floor.
Mr. Chairman. Bago ako pumunta doon sa topic ko as to yung timeline, Mr. Chair, nung pagbibigay ng mga applications sa FDA. Mainit yung balitaktakan ni Congressman Mike regarding doon sa CSP, Compassionate Special Permit. This is my question for the FDA. Am I right in assuming is it that statement you made earlier that it is the doctor or institution that uses Compassionate Special Permit, FDA?
Opo, ganito po yun. Pag meron po isang doktor na espesyalista lalo na at isang hospital, may mga espesyalista po, nangailangan po sila ng gamot na tingin po nila, kailangan po ng pasyente nila at hindi po rehistrado sa Pilipinas at wala pong nagsusupply o nagdi-distribute o nag-i-import dito, pwede po silang humingi ng permiso, itong ang CSP, mula sa FDA para payagan silang ipasok po yung gamot na yon. Pero in a limited quantity po na idideklara nila.
So saan po sila mag-apply? Sa inyo ho, FDA?
Opo, naka-online submission po tayo. Wala po, hindi kailangan pumunta sa FDA and within 48 hours mabibigyan po yan ng permit upon evaluation po ng FDA.
Bilis ho yan. Hindi ho ano yan. Katulad ng iba na binabanggit kanina, 2013, 2014 pa yung automatic renewal. Hindi pa naayos. So ito ho, sinasabi nyo 24, 48 hours nandyan na ho.
Limited amount lang po ito. Good for the
Gaano ho kalimited ang limited, Doc?
Come again po, sorry po.
Gaano ho kalimited yung limited?
Idideklara po nila yung yung number of patient, tapos kung ano po yung dosage regimen, talagang eksakto po halos yung i-request niyang gamot.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bagay po sa pasyente.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I would go to as to the questions Ivermectin, I will yield to the questions of my senior colleagues, Kong Marcoleta and Kong Mike Defensor. I'm interested more on the policy of the FDA. Regarding, this is a question, Mr. Chair, for FDA. During the crafting, conceptualization of your rules and regulations, protocols, was the estimated timeline, kasama ho dun ba yun sa paggawa, sa pag-craft ninyo ng rules and regulations nyo? Yung timeline as to from application, kailan ho ma-aprobahan? In terms of, number one, yung CPR, EUA po, pwede nyo rin ho in-discuss. So, kasama ho ba in determining yung policy nyo as to application? Kasama ho ba yung timeline procedures dyan, FDA?
Opo, kasama po yan. Kasama po, Congressman, lalo na po meron po tayo ng ease of doing business law. Isa po yan sa isang konsiderasyon na importante kung gaano po kabilis ang turnaround time po, yung maximum processing time. So bawat step po i-consider natin.
Do you have an actual actual timeline based on experience FDA, Mr. Chair? Para maanohan namin, may playing ground kami. Gaano ba katagal ang pag-apply sa isang certificate of product registration, FDA?
Congressman, I will refer you po sa director po ng Center for Drug Regulation Research. Sila po ang nagpa-plot nito, nagpa-plan po ng mga maximum processing time.
Okay.
Si Director Jesusa Joyce Sirunay po ang director ng Center for Drug Regulation and Research. Nandito pa po siya. Salamat po.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Can I answer?
Yes po.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Meron po tayong FDA Citizens Charter na siyang ating ginagamit sa timeline or turnaround time na ginamit ni DDG OCA. This is on situations where there is no backlog. Ang ating kasi ngayon ay malaki ang backlog. Kung inyo po dapatin, meron kasi kaming presentation para lang maintindihan ng ating mga
Bigyan niyo lang ho ako, Mr. Chair, ng sample. Na for example, nag-submit ng 2019 na mga for certificate for CPR. Ngayon 2021, approved na ho ba yung applications nila?
Mr. Chair, can I say something?
Yes, please go ahead.
Honorable Congressman, wala po akong data as of now na ma-present, but we have a presentation na pinra-prepare sa amin. Pero ang magiging sagot ko po is we can provide. Yung gusto po niyong hingin, we can pull out a DTN tapos yung kanyang processing time. Ang atin po kasing FDA CDRR ngayon, nung naabutan ko nung June 2020, malaki po ang backlog. Kaya ang ginagawa po natin ngayon ay dinigitize na lang para yung ating application ay lalong mapabilis. I came in with a very big backlog. So yung presentation sana namin, ipakita namin yung way forward. Kasi nasimulan na yung pag-digitize. Ito po yung nakita namin na paraan. Kasi natapos lang talaga po at the current personal complement ay 50% of whatever backlog that we have. Kaya ang nakita po namin ay i-digitize siya all the way. E-service online. However, kung gusto nyo pong makakuha ng isang DTN, allow me to get and then submit to the committee para inyo pong mapag-aralan. Kasi we have to pull from the records to satisfy yung inyo pong gustong hanapin dun sa information na pwede naming maibigay.
Mr. Chair, can we request a copy of the backlogs of FDA? Kung sinasabi niyo ho kanina, 50% pa lang, 2013, 2014 pa ho yung hindi na-approve. So could we make them submit, Mr. Chair? Yung backlogs ho nila, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please comply, Director, with the list of backlogs in your application process.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will. Can we ask a deadline of Friday so we can give
1 week from now until Monday.
That will be good, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My next question would be for our doctors present, Mr. Chair, yung hindi pa ho nadidemanda ng Philippine Medical Association. Meron ho ba sa inyo na nakapag-prescribe na ng Ivermectin, Mr. Chair, doon sa mga ano ho natin, sa mga guests natin dito sa hearing na ito, Mr. Chair? Meron na ho ba sa mga doktor na imbitado ho natin?
I think yung hindi pa o
nag-prescribe na ng Ivermectin, Mr. Chair.
I think you should ask Congressman Mike. Siya may kilala dyan. Dr. Iggy daw.
Doc Iggy, kayo ho ba ay nakapag-prescribe na ng Ivermectin sa inyo ho mga pasyente relative to COVID? Doc Iggy.
Yes po, Congressman.
Pagka-prescribe di ba ho, Doc, nahirapan ba yung inyong mga pasyente na bumili o procure itong gamot na Ivermectin, Doc?
Ilan pa lang naman po na prescribean ko. Yung iba hindi pa rin kasi available sa lugar nila, pero may mga 3 na po na nakabili na po.
So ngayon ba, Mr. Chair, available na ba sa market yung Ivermectin?
Sa Mercury Drug daw, meron daw available.
O natanong ko ho kasi, Mr. Chair, meron ho nagbigay sa akin eh. Kaso lang walang pangalan sa likod, basta nakalagay Ivermectin lang, kulay puti na nasa capsule. Oh, wala akong kahit anong sulat, Mr. Chair, kaya hindi ko ininom. Kaya ho, maghahanap ako kung bibigyan ho ako ni Congressman BH. Baka pwede pa prophylaxis. Kay Doc Iggy, Mr. Chair, sa past few weeks, no, na nag-prescribe ho kayo ng Ivermectin sa mga pasyente, meron ho bang lumapit sa inyo o na nagkaroon ng complication ho, Doc Iggy?
Wala pa naman po.
Wala pa ho, so wala.
Complication na tinatawag na pang relatively minor, for example, medyo nahilo lang, ganun lang. Hindi naman considered adverse event, yung minor events.
Kay Doc Lendrito, Mr. Chair, kayo ho, Doc, nag-prescribe na rin ho ba kayo ng Ivermectin sa mga pasyente, Doc? Dr. Lendrito?
Yes, but to the patients that I prescribe, usually those patients were abroad. But to my patients, which numbers to more than 10,000, I gave it directly. I dispense it myself. I produce the medicine myself. I don't need to write the prescription. I'm giving the medicine and giving the instruction as well.
Yes, Doc. Out of your patients, Doc, meron ba naka-encounter ng complications relative to Ivermectin?
No adverse reaction, sir, not a single one. I have side effects like some allergies, just a few, maybe 20 or 30. Some have maybe 50 to 100 diarrhea, abdominal pain. And those are very transient. One time or two times na nagtae tapos na. This is something to do with the patient that they have.
Last question, Mr. Chair, to both doctors who prescribe already Ivermectin to their patients. Meron ho bang significant improvements doon ho sa mga pinag-prescribe nyo relative to Ivermectin, Doc Lendrito and Doc Agbayani?
Yes, they have very significant improvements. Last year I was saying in terms of prophylaxis 99%. In terms of early treatment, the success about 89%. But this year, upon the coming of the variants, then my success in prophylaxis I placed it about 90, and for the early treatment I placed about 80.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all.
Similar.
Thank you. Next, we will entertain a statement as requested by Dr. Iggy. Iggy Agbayani, you have 5 minutes for your statement on the matter. Dr. Iggy?
Yes, sir. Actually prepared a presentation. Am I able to present it kahit nakalahati lang po?
Opo, kasi medyo may session kami 3 o'clock kahit kalahati lang po.
Sige po. Pwede pong i-share yung screen or if I may share my screen?
Yes, please.
Nahirapan po kung... Yan po. Okay. So, ang title po ng aking presentation, Assumption of the Corruption in the Philippine Health and Pharmaceutical Sector. Dahil nga po na may mga sintomas na parang ganito na nga dahil sa delay, may double standard, iba po ang pagtrato natin ng face shield, ng Ivermectin, remdesivir, sa Lenalidomide, at may censorship po sa social media. Pati rin po sa international media, parang marami po nag-negative overreaction pagdating sa Ivermectin. Kaya parang nakapagtaka po talaga. Tapos kahit na essential drug lang po siya ay relegated to the animal use dito sa Pilipinas. Parang sinasabi pang hayop lang daw. Saka kami mga doktor ay na-threaten na po from prescribing Ivermectin. So parang kakaiba po talaga ang trato sa Ivermectin sa mga iba pang gamot. Nakita ko po itong presentation na to sa internet, galing po sa transparency.org.uk, titled Corruption in the Pharmaceutical Sector. At ginawa po ito noong 2016. Ang vision po ng transparency.org is a world in which government, business, civil society, and the daily lives of people are free from corruption. May special place po talaga ang pharmaceutical and health program pagdating sa corruption. Ito po nahanap ng Transparency International. Within the health sector, pharmaceuticals stand out as a subsector that is particularly prone to corruption. Marami pong example nito buong mundo at nagdi-display po talaga ng corruption at nadi-endanger po ang ating kalusugan dahil dito sa corruption na to. At yun nga po, whether it is pharmaceutical company bribing a single doctor or kickbacks from the regulators. Transparency International po nagsasabi niya. It is one of the worst kind of corruptions because involved po ang buhay sa kanyang kalusugan. At apektado po yung tinatawag namin morbidity rates sa mga bata at kinamamatay pa nila at ang kalusugan. At yun nga sinasabi nila itong corruption ito ay life and death consequences. So malaki pong epekto lalo na kung pandemya dahil hindi lang po buhay pati yung ekonomiya natin na apektuhan. Kaya dapat natin talaga tukuyin itong corruption na to. So sabi nga nila Karina, worth risking my neck and career. Dahil ganito po ang epekto. Ngayon, tignan natin ang randomized control studies. Lumalabas po na ang nagbibigay ng pera para sa randomized control studies ay yung mga pharmaceutical industry po. At sila po ay nagkukontrata ng gumawa ng randomized control trials dahil sila po ang may pera. Yung mga randomized control trials sa ibang bansa, dahil dun sa Ivermectin, tandaan natin, ang Ivermectin po, tapos na po ang patent niya. Kaya halos wala pong pera na ibibigay para gumawa ng randomized control trials. Pero nagawa pa rin nila. Tinaan na lang po sa pera ng hospital at sa pera ng mga doktor. Kaya wag po sana nila sabihin na garbage in, garbage out dahil talaga po pinaghirapan po ng mga scientific yon. Ngayon, may mga examples po ng mga improprieties sa FDA na prone to corruption. Katulad po ng pagtanggal ng face shield na mandato naman po ng FDA yan. Tinanggal po ng FDA sa DOH yung face shield. Meron pong dokumento dyan na sinasabing hindi raw nila hawak yan. Medyo nakakapagtaka yan. Yung eligibility or yung DEU, subject only to the PISMID criteria, yan po ay nung last year, binigyan po sila ng parang powerful discretion given to a non-government and incorporated group. Imagine nyo, sila po magdi-decide kung pwede ipasok sa DEU under eligibility. Yung emergency use authorization po, fully under the discretion of the FDA, Director General. At subject po yan sa secret experts at hindi naman limitado sa kanya. Masyado po mataas ang powers na binibigay natin sa FDA. Continued authorization of remdesivir despite the non-recommendation by the WHO. Yan po mga examples of impropriety na prone dahil sa corruption. Sabi po ng Transparency International, follow the money. So ito nga po yung money. 9 out of 10 largest pharmaceutical companies spent more on marketing than research and development in 2013. Inaral po nila yan. In the US alone, pharmaceutical industry spends estimated $42 billion on promotion activities that target
Sir, one minute
annually.
po.
So marami po mga methods ng corruption, yung pag-bribe ng doktor directly at dun sa mga pharmaceutical industry. Nagkaroon po ng Sunshine Act in the US. Ito po ay nagre-require ng mga doktor na ipalabas kung magkano po ang binibigay sa mga doktor noong 2004. Sana po ay magkaroon rin tayong ganito. Ginawa rin po sa Europe at sa UK, ang tawag po doon ng Sunshine Rule. Ito po ang example. For example, isang doktor na kaibigan ko at pinakita na siya po ay nagsasalita laban sa Ivermectin. Siya po ay nabayaran ng $59,000 noong taon 2018. Promotional speaker lang po. Siya po ay nakareceive ng $28,000. Consulting, $17,000. Hindi po pasyente Travel and lodging, $11,000. So yan po nagagawa ng Sunshine Act. Napapakita po kung sino talaga ang may conflict of interest. At ganun din po, ito po mga nagbibigay ng bayad yan. Merck, Gilead, iba-ibang grupo po nagbabayad. At ito nga po, pati mga teaching hospitals po, binabayaran din po ng mga, ng mga pharmaceutical. Ito po yung mga hospital sa US na nakikita natin, 1.57 million binabayad. Yung iba naman po research and development, pero hindi natin po, hindi po pinapakita rito. At ang mga doktor po ay nasa Big Pharma payroll rin po yan. Nationwide po, 84% ng physicians had some form of financial interaction with the manufacturers of drugs, devices, biologicals, and majority are meals nga lang. Pero again, tumatanggap po ang mahigit 80%.
Excuse me.
Okay, I will stop na po.
Thank you. Dr. Landrito.
Yeah, can I have 2 minutes?
Mr. Chair, big question. One question lang po.
Can we reserve the questioning in the second round
Yes,
so
Mr.
that
Chair.
it will move fast?
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr. Chair.
thank you. Dr.
Mr. Chair,
Landrito.
yes. Can I have my presentation, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, I will be presenting on summary of clinical trials in the use of ivermectin on COVID-19. This has been maligned from the start of our session. They have been maligning this, fearing that we have the best determiners of quality of trials in the Philippines. But this is based on the 5 most prominent meta-analysis by Dr. Bryant, Dr. Hill, Dr. Coriel, Dr. Lowry, and Dr. Nodelli. So it tells about prophylaxis, early treatment, and late treatment of ivermectin. In terms of random effects of meta-analysis, with pooled effects using the most serious outcomes reported the following. In terms of prophylaxis, we have 85% improvement. In terms of early treatment, there is 79% improvement. In terms of late treatment, we have 46% improvement. Now, when we look into which clinical trials, we have already more than 70 clinical trials. 55 are already completed, others are ongoing. No? So the total of these 55 clinical trials is a 70% improvement. Okay, when we go to 20 ivermectin COVID-19 mortality results, for prophylaxis, it's 96% improvement. For early treatment, it's 81% improvement. For late treatment, it's 66% improvement. And altogether, all overall, we have 74% improvement. That's mortality that we're talking about. When we talk about mechanical ventilators, ibig sabihin yung mga pasyenteng naka-respirator, pag binigyan sila ng ivermectin, in early treatment, they get 80% improvement. Pag late treatment, they have 52% improvement. Overall, it's 61% improvement. And if we talk about patients who are admitted to the ICU, you give ivermectin, you add ivermectin for early treatment, you get 14% improvement, and you add ivermectin for late treatment, you get 70% improvement. Together, that's 30% improvement. For hospitalization, the results on prophylaxis is 80%. Early treatment is 79%. Late treatment, 38%, and overall is 49% improvement. For viral clearance, early treatment, you get 66% improvement there. Late treatment, 40% improvement. All studies, 58% improvement. Now, the trials which were reviewed were 29 among the 55. Prophylaxis, they are saying there's 88% improvement. Early treatment, there's 80% improvement. And late treatment, there's 35% improvement. Overall, it's 70% improvement. Now, if you can see, all the proponents of the trials are listed in all my data. So, in summary, for early treatment, 22 of the 22 studies gave positive, revealed positive effects, though that's 100%. For late treatment, is 17 out of 19, that's 89%. For prophylaxis, 14 out of 14 that did the study had 100%, reported 100% positive effects. So for all the studies, putting all together prophylaxis, early treatment, and late treatment, you get 96%, 96%. It means you have one chance in 23 trillion